Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. General Kiyu Amatori has died from Mima Amatori's sneak attack, and Mima Amatori just now committed suicide out of fear of punishment. Now, listen to my order. All samurai and soldiers, lay down your weapon. All riot must stop immediately. The army from the world government will now take over the entire fortress. I repeat, from now on, anyone still holding a weapon will be considered a member of the Hunter Guard and will be shot. Outside the meeting hall, Mima Amatori, who was about to hit the ground and be smashed to pieces, was suddenly swept up by a yellow sandstorm and landed steadily on the ground. Looks like she did quite well. Such a girl with courage is rare. Crocodile, smoking a cigar, appeared beside him, looked up at the emerald green tiles on the roof, and grinned. Yes, she is indeed a remarkable girl. I think this nation will become better under her leadership. Mima Amatori said softly. Crocodile listened to the continuous gunshot and the broadcast, exhaled white smoke, and teased. Oh, weren't you thinking of destroying this place, or even this nation, before? My target of revenge is Kiyu Amatori and the high officials who participated in the conspiracy 10 years ago. As for the soldiers and citizens of these stations, they were just fuel that had to be ignited. Mima Amatori looked up at Crocodile with a calm gaze. There was no helping it, the latter was simply too tall, truly a giant. Now with your world government, you can completely bypass these people and pick out those cowardly trash. At that time, I will apply to be their executioner, to avenge those 400,000 warrior. Ha 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 ha, you should say our world government, although I used to hate it too. Crocodile curled his lip, clearly not wanting to say more about this, and immediately changed the topic. However, to this world, you are now a dead person. Next, you need to return to the base and provide us with intelligence and suggestions there. Okay, then I'll return to Katetsugio first. Mima Amatori nodded and turned to leave, seemingly without any attachment to this place. At the same time, in the meeting hall upstairs, the people who heard Diam's announcement were also stunned. After they reacted, they immediately started questioning her all at once. Princess Iam, what is the world government? Are there army from other influence outside? That's right, why should our soldiers lay down their weapon? Even Wichayuki Makino looked at his niece with hesitation at this moment, but then he heard Iam explain. The world government is a massive organization composed of over 170 overseas countries. This time they came to incorporate Hinamoto into it and specifically came to visit General Amatori. But unexpectedly, the Hunter Guard rebellion occurred, and Mima Amatori caused chaos throughout the entire fortress. So I asked them to come and help control the situation. Otherwise, if this continues, the entire Kongakaku will be destroyed, and who knows how many people will be left. She did not reveal the truth that the world government was from another world, because such a shocking matter was not suitable to be revealed at such a tense moment. Compared to that, saying it was an overseas world organization was more appropriate. After all, everyone present belonged to the higher-ups of the shogunate and knew more or less about the existence of overseas nations. Overseas influence? But why haven't I heard of any world government? Could it be an alliance organization recently formed by overseas countries? The high-rank samurai and high-ranking officials immediately started discussing amongst themselves. Although some raised questions, they didn't find it that incredible. Instead, they started filling in the blanks logically. But we don't have a general now. Suddenly, a high official who was extremely sensitive to politics was the first to spot the blind spot. At this, everyone's gaze focused on Michiyuki Makino. Because as a Roju, he was the highest rank official present. Indeed, if we are to hold a meeting with such a world-class organization, we must have a general summon on our side. Michiyuki Makino fell into thought, glancing at the Kabane corpse below the platform, and said hesitantly. But the general is all ready. How about we invite Madam General? A high-rank samurai suggested. No. Another high official flatly refused, saying, I don't think the Amatori family is suitable to be the general's family anymore, because all of this was caused by their own family matters, making us look so pathetic and rude in front of outsiders. Anyway, Kiyu Amatori and Mima Amatori were dead, and the Amatori family only had some old, weak, women, and children left. They no longer had any scruples. This old man has a suggestion. What do you all think? Michiyuki Makino seemed to have made some decision and suddenly spoke. I suggest that Princess Yatsugawa Iom temporarily take the position of general and meet with this world government. After all, she is the only chief steward present. According to law, when the general's family has no successor or no longer serves as general, one person and one family must be chosen from the chief stewards in various places. Moreover, it was Princess Iom who stopped Mima Amatori before, and also stopped everyone from killing each other. And it was also she who invited the world government to help suppress the rebellion and chaos. No matter how you look at it, she is the best candidate for the general's position. At this moment, although no one knew what this Roja was thinking, his decision had a surprising coincidence with Iom's plan. It saved the world government some subsequent means. Chapter 215, The Second Stargate World? Stag Stargate Base. Hello? This is Linode. Control of Konbakaku is complete. On Senior Director Addison's desk, the transponder snail reported solemnly, its face grim. However, the shogunate's higher-ups themselves nominated Yatsugawa Iom to become the new general, so we did not carry out elimination or deterrence against them. That's a good thing, but also a bad thing. Senior Director Addison said thoughtfully. It is indeed surprising. Originally, we were supposed to strongly push Yatsugawa Iom to become the newly appointed general, and then use the Hunter Guard Rebellion to purge the opponents. Although everything went smoothly in this situation, it has also planted a hidden danger. Something is bound to happen later. Senior Director Linode sighed. Senior Director Addison nodded and said. We can only mention it to Cypher Paul. They are the professional ones in this regard. Oh right, we found some very valuable things here. Senior Director Linode, who was currently in Konbakaku, looked at the several important items that had been initially screened and picked out on the desk, and said to the transponder snail in his hand. Oh? Tell me about it. Senior Director Addison was very interested in this matter. In the database here, we found the complete design blueprint for the McClatchy mechanism high-pressure special steam engine. All the writing on it is in English language. It must be the original copy from the European continent. There are also design blueprints for manufacturing those large iron armored trains called Iron Fortress, city design blueprints for the stations in various places, and the mineral resource distribution map within Hinamoto that the shogunate has explored over the past 200 years. Senior Director Addison at the Stargate base smiled more and more brightly as he listened, but when Senior Director Linode said the next thing, he was momentarily stunned. Besides that, there's a world map. A world map? Senior Director Addison suddenly stood up and said in surprise. You really found it? Quick, hang up the call first, we'll use the visual den mushi. No need, I brought a fax device when I came. We've already taken pictures of the world map and the mineral resource map and sent them over there. Send it to the homeland for the higher-ups to see. Senior Director Linode smiled. As for these design blueprints, I will have someone pack them up and send them over. I believe those scientists would prefer to see the original copies, right? All right. Senior Director Addison had nothing more to say. He immediately hung up the transponder snail call and then called his secretary outside, instructing. Go see if a fax has come through and bring it to me immediately. An hour later. Holy Land Mary Ejo's, Room of Authority. 2 high-definition maps were projected into midair by a visual den mushi, for the convenience of the 5 men who held the highest power in the world to examine. Hinamoto really is an island. St. Jaga Ursha Saturn chuckled. Yes, judging from the markings on it, next to it is the Asia continent, above that is the European continent, to the west is the Africa continent, to the south is an Australia continent, and on the other side of the Great Sea to the east, there are the North America continent and the South America continent. St. Marcus Mars narrowed his gaze and read out the English language marked on the map one by one, chuckling. It seems the Kobenrai world isn't small. Referencing the area of Hinamoto, that Australia continent to the south looks more than 3 times larger than Alavista. St. Shepherd Jupiter nodded. According to the previous intelligence, the Kobane spread from the European continent. So, looking at this map, the Asia continent and Africa continent connected to it are likely also ravaged by Kobane. A slight curve appeared at the corner of St. Topman Warcurry's usually stern mouth, and he chuckled softly. If we also consider Kobane as one of the resources, then the 3 continents opposite have very few people, but are full of various resources instead. Ahem, that's a bit of reaching far for what's near. We should first arrange Hinamoto before us properly. The other continents are there and won't run away, let's take it slow. St. Jaga Ursha Saturn said, reminding them. This caused the gazes of the other four to shift to the mineral resource distribution map of Hinamoto, where they found quite a few mineral deposits marked. There were only 4 locations with the largest and most obvious text. Sato, gold, K, gold, Kamashi, iron, Hidden Stones Villagemi, silver. St. Topman Warkuri, as the supreme leader of the political affairs department, was most concerned about these natural resources. The more he looked, the happier he became, and the curve of his mouth became more and more pronounced. There's actually an iron mine here. I wonder how big the scale is? I'll have the mineral resources department send people over to take a look later. But no matter what, for the world government on planet C, where iron ore resources are scarce, finding an iron mine is definitely a great thing. On the contrary, they didn't pay much attention to the gold ore and silver ore. No wonder the people of this world could lay railway tracks everywhere, and iron armored trains were one after another, even firearms were made of metal. St. Topman Warkuri sighed with emotion. But now they are all ours. St. Jaga Ursha Saturn said heavily, holding Shodai Kaitetsu. His gaze was burning as he stared at the world map. A small Hinamoto has so many mineral resources, then. These words made the other 4 glance at him speechlessly. Who was it just now who said not to reach far for what's near? But they could all understand this feeling of excitement. This is the charm of the world map, it miniaturizes an entire world and displays it before people. Multiverse conquest, this is multiverse conquest. One Kabinrai world allows us to possess everything of an entire world. What about when we encounter more worlds in the future? At this moment, the 5 elders' breathing became heavy, but their gaze burned with the flame called ambition. There is no doubt that this generation of 5 elders will definitely become the most famous 5 elders in history. Going down in history is already set in stone. At this point, St. Topman Warkuri took a deep breath. Let's calm down first. To mine these iron ore and gold ore, there are quite a few things that need to be prepared: the rule over the shogunate, the elimination of the kabane, the exploration by technical personnel, the organization of laborers, the transport of equipment. This old man estimates it will be difficult to officially begin mining within this year. St. Marcus Mars nodded and said. The shipyard also needs time for construction. After it's built, ships also need time for manufacturing. These matters cannot be rushed at all. We can only wait patiently. Yes, the army will also need to send in more army next, speeding up troop training while first clearing out the kabane in Hinamoto. From now on, Hinamoto will be our headquarters in the Kabinrai world. Necessary cleanup is still needed. St. Jaga Ursha Saturn also agreed. At this moment, St. Topman Warkuri straightened up and scanned the 4 colleagues around him, proposing seriously. Everyone, this old man thinks it's time to officially disclose the matter of the Stargate within the government. Currently, within the world government, although quite a few higher-ups already know about another world, it hasn't been officially announced at the official level, so work efficiency often cannot be maximized. You want to convene a government conference? St. Shepherd Jupiter raised an eyebrow. Yes, gather all senior officials above bureau chief level and high-ranking commanders from the military, political affairs department, judiciary, proclamation government institute, and cipher poll. Let all departments participate in the discussion of the Kabinrai world together and come up with a comprehensive development plan. After speaking, St. Topman Warkuri looked at everyone meaningfully. It can also be considered accumulating enough experience for future Stargate worlds. I believe it won't be long before Lord Imu opens the Stargate to the second world. Perhaps, as early as next year. Chapter 216, Divine Wind vs. Tsunami. The government conference that the 5 elders wanted to convene wasn't something that could be held immediately just because they wished it. The various departments had dozens of large and small divisions. Getting every bureau chief level or vice admiral and above high-ranking official and commander together on the same day, and then discussing for 2 or 3 days, was not an easy matter. This required giving everyone a longer period for adjustment and preparation. In fact, for the world government, the most important thing was to let time pass. The current situation was that many projects, engineering works, and plans were in their initial stages. Yet, even though less than a year had passed, the citizens of the world nations and various islands could feel the world changing with each passing day. Thinking back carefully, what had happened in this marine calendar 1498. First, the pirate king Guldi Roger was publicly executed, followed closely by Golden Lion Shiki being arrested and imprisoned. After that, Douglas Barrett caused a great disturbance in the first half of the Grand Line and was also arrested. Then, in Water 7, the shipwrights led by Tom's workers began developing the sea train with the world government's funding. Drum Kingdom was selected by the world government as a medical development cooperation nation, establishing a medical academy and the world hospital headquarters. Fishman Island signed the Equal and Friendly Relations Communique with the world government, Sabati Archipelago was designated as a fisherman safety zone, and at the same time, a marine branch was established inland, on the island of Fishman Island. The kingdoms and islands in the North Blue with a certain industrial base also had a large amount of finance and administrative aspect talents transferred away by the world government. And recently, the G0 branch, where the Admiral candidate Vice Admiral Kizaru was stationed, guarded Reverse Mountain, arresting or destroying the unlucky pirates pouring in from the four seas ship after ship, as if waiting for a rabbit by a stump. This matter had long spread among the world nations of the four seas, because even their merchant ships, cargo ships, and noble cruise ships had to undergo inspection. At the same time, marine warships were continuously transporting prisoners from Impel down to the bridge on the sea in the East Blue, then sending the citizens who were liberated in order back to their hometowns, and finally establishing towns, or even preparing to establish nations, with the help of the world government. Furthermore, the propaganda department had been making a splash recently. They were responsible for escorting Queen Atoheim of Fishman Island to various world nations in the first half of the Grand Line for tour speeches, and broadcasting the speeches to world nations. They also had to organize concert after concert for Tesoro and Brooke, which were also world broadcasts, while Stella accompanied them for interviews and coverage. It was said that the propaganda department was also preparing some fixed-time live programs. This caused millions upon millions of citizens to gradually form the habit of opening their visual Den Mushi to watch live broadcasts, directly leading to a more than tenfold surge in visual Den Mushi sales volume. As for the noble circle in various nations, the hottest entertainment activity was organizing tennis matches between nobles. Tennis courts appeared one after another in the capitals of various nations, and the sound of tennis balls being hit echoed everywhere. In addition, what many lower-tier kingdoms anticipated the most was that after Sorba Kingdom, two more kingdoms that were investigated by the finance department and confirmed to have difficulty paying the heavenly tribute were exempted from the heavenly tribute for 4 years. It was said that they would also be subsidized with various supplies and guided in their economic development. For those poor nations and small nations, this was simply a ray of hope in the darkness. This made countless citizens look forward to the convening of the next reverie. Meanwhile, on Sabati Archipelago, after the decisive dragon was transferred to the Ministry of Police Affairs under the Judiciary, he quickly renovated the Marine branch here into the first police station. The walls of the base and the building exterior walls were repainted from the original copy sea blue to dark green. Even the Marine soldiers' uniforms changed from blue and white sailor uniforms to wearing a large green hat with black brim, a close-fitting dark green stand-collar jacket, paired with dark green trousers, an armed belt, and black high boots. As for those who transferred from Marine officers to high-ranking police officers, they also had an extra-large cloak that was green on the outside and black on the inside on their shoulders. Those who used blades also carried a long saber at their waist. Overall, they looked very capable. But these were just superficial changes. Although it initially aroused the curiosity of many citizens on the island and the fishmen and mermaids who came to visit, after a few days, it no longer felt strange. This was because they found that what these people did was no different from before. They were still standing guard and patrolling, just in a different uniform. Inside the office. "I'm very sorry, Minister Dragon. I can't leave just yet. I want to personally witness Sorbat Kingdom become prosperous with the help of the world government and these economic specialists. 4 years. After the next reverie, I'll report to you, alright?" Dragon could only sigh inwardly upon seeing the transponder snail reply like this, then calmly said, "Alright, I will keep the position of Military Police Bureau Chief here for you for 4 years. Thank you very much." Click, as the other side hung up, the transponder snail's eyes drooped. "Ah." Dragon rubbed the bridge of his nose, feeling a bit troubled. He had just been contacting Bartholomew Kuma, intending to arrange a time to visit, but was directly refused by the other party. He was truly short-handed right now. Most of the time, he had to personally travel to various kingdoms to oversee the construction of local police stations and communication with the royalty of those kingdoms. However, neither the process nor the result could be said to be very good. Just as he had anticipated, these royalty simply did not support the establishment of police stations. Although there was no news yet saying that the judiciary would strip affiliated countries of their judicial power, these kings could still feel that the appearance of the police would bring them a lot of trouble. Although the construction department of the political affairs department was also transferring people to help, how could that compare to directly recruiting laborers locally? And when he directly approached these kings, they gave various excuses, saying they supported the world government's policy but wanted to see the situation of police stations in other kingdoms first. But the problem was that most kingdoms had this attitude, so whose situation were these kingdoms going to look at? Although he knew that the establishment of the Ministry of Police Affairs was a very difficult process, being in the midst of it still made him feel tormented and exhausted. Everyone clearly knew that police stations were bound to exist sooner or later, but everyone hoped that time would come a little later. Dragon felt that the key point still lay in the world government being too busy. They were so busy that they couldn't focus their main energy on the matters of the Ministry of Police Affairs. Otherwise, if they truly pushed it forward with full force, it wouldn't take even a year for police stations to sprout up everywhere in the first half of the Grand Line. But now, he and the judiciary could only rely on their own efforts. Knock knock knock, Minister. Suddenly, Black Cat, three-legged cat, who had been captured by Dragon in the South Blue back then, knocked on the door a few times before pushing it open and entering, looking very anxious. At this moment, he was already a police sergeant. Although his rank was only one level higher than an ordinary police officer, after entering Zephyr's training camp next year and returning after receiving training, he would definitely be promoted further. Please come out and see quickly. A giant tsunami has appeared at sea and is heading towards us. Facing Dragon's questioning gaze, three-legged cat quickly shouted. Whoosh. The next second, Dragon transformed into a green whirlwind, scattering the documents on the office desk everywhere, while his figure had already appeared above the base. Indeed, looking out, he saw a super large wave, estimated to be 40 to 50 meters high, rushing towards them. The area near the dock on Hotel Street was already in chaos, with everyone screaming and frantically running inland, on the island. It was simply like a natural disaster had struck, the arrival of doomsday. Divine wind. Although he didn't know what matter had occurred, he decisively activated his hurricane fruit ability, unleashing surging green wind power from his body. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. In an instant, a fierce large green wind began to appear above his head, forming a surging wind wall visible to the naked eye. It swept rapidly across the sky above Sabati Archipelago with overwhelming force, directly confronting the terrifying super large wave. Boom. Soon, the tsunami and the wind wall collided fiercely under the terrified gazes of countless citizens. Chapter 217, Stussy's Devil Fruit Ability. What kind of scene would it be when a super tsunami nearly 20 stories high rolls in from the sea surface, roaring and surging towards a densely populated metropolis? Buildings would be flattened, large trees would be snapped, and people would be swallowed by the cold sea waves after being played with like insects. Everything would become twisted and shattered. This is a natural disaster. In a normal, ordinary world, this is something human beings cannot resist, but it's different here, because this is planet C. In this world, there exist beings comparable to natural disasters, or even more terrifying than natural disasters. Wind, great wind. For the humans, fishmen, and mermaids on Sabati Archipelago, the originally clear blue sky was now completely covered by a green gale. Those air currents, which looked extremely turbulent just by seeing them with the naked eye, brought everyone infinite security the moment they collided with a tsunami. That giant sea wave, which was carrying, pressing, and rolling forward with endless seawater, was met head-on and severely struck by this divine wind that seemed to come from a god. No matter how much it tried to smash through the obstruction with brute force, this tall green wind wall remained motionless, ultimately forcing all the seawater to helplessly split towards both sides. Not a single drop of seawater could land on the land of Sabati Archipelago. Whoa. Ah, Minister Dragon. Too strong, truly too strong. Is this the strength of a Logia user? The citizens of the entire Hotel Street stopped in their tracks when they saw this scene, cheering loudly as they looked with excitement at the green figure appearing in the high altitude. Even the police officers who had rushed to maintain order were filled with pride and admiration. However, Dragon, who had just saved the entire Sabati Archipelago, frowned deeply. After the tsunami lost its destructive power by being diverted, his entire being transformed back into a gale and headed towards the distance. He had to go see what the matter was. Is that? Not long after, Dragon, who was in the high altitude, saw an extremely giant thing appear in the distance. The height of that thing was so great that even from his current position, he had to look up to see it. Is this a ship? When Dragon continued to fly upwards rapidly and finally rose higher than this colossus, he was able to see its true shape clearly. This was a super tower ship made of logs, with an area comparable to the entire Sabati Archipelago, but over 100 meters high. Its whole surface was covered with densely packed doors and windows, and only the top layer was covered with a thick layer of moss. Did it cause the great tsunami? Just as Dragon was looking up and down at this supergiant ship in confusion, there was a loud noise from under the sea surface not far away. Immediately after, a white figure leaped out from a tall water spout and then landed steadily on the ship's deck. Ha 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 ha. Immediately after, a burst of wild laughter that made a string of black lines appear on Dragon's head instantly resounded throughout the entire great sea and the blue sky. Well. This person was none other than his pops, the newly promoted Iron Fist Admiral Garp, Monkey D. Garp. He was laughing so hard that tears were streaming out, his face full of a proud, brilliant smile. This old man knew I could push it up. He had pushed this Noah's Ark up to the sea surface by himself from 10,000 meters below the seabed. The difficulty and hardship involved could be imagined without being said. But for Garp, the entire process was interesting and challenging. Moreover, as the height continuously increased, the water pressure became smaller and smaller, and the pushing process became faster and faster. Psychologically speaking, the further along he got, the more refreshing it felt. "Father, you're—" Dragon transformed into a ball of wind and appeared about 10 meters in front of Garp. He had always thought he was used to his father's recklessness. But now he realized he hadn't fully adapted yet. Garp stopped laughing, looked over in confusion, and asked, "Brat, why did you come here?" "Because Sabati Archipelago was almost submerged under a tsunami just now, so I came to see what the matter was," Dragon replied, looking back at him with complex feelings. "Huh?" Garp was stunned, but immediately realized that the great tsunami was caused when Noah's Ark was pushed up just now. After all, the appearance of such a large thing would definitely displace a large amount of seawater. "So, how is it now?" Dragon looked speechlessly at Garp, who was awkwardly scratching the back of his head, and said, "I blocked it with my ability." "Is that so?" "Ah ha 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 ha, as expected of my son, well done." Garp was happy to hear this. Since no destruction was caused, it was fine. He had just been worried that if the matter had really occurred, Sengoku would nag him for a long time when he went back. "Then what are you doing, and what is this thing?" Dragon gave a shake head and said no more, glancing at the supergiant ship and asking. When this was brought up, Garp's interest returned, and he laughed with excitement. "Oh, this? Listen to me, this thing has a great origin. I spent several days and finally managed to push it up from Fishman Island. This is—" Dragon listened to him for a long time before understanding what was going on. One person pushing this island-sized giant ship from 10,000 meters below the seabed. He had never dared to imagine such a matter before, because it was simply impossible. But now, his father had proven with his strength that it was still possible. Swish. 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 Just then, black figures appeared around them. They were the government officials led by Stussy. They had been staying in a ship wrapped in a bubble for the past few days, taking turns controlling the ship rudder to follow Garp and Noah's Ark. Has it finally been pushed up? Although I still think it was a complete waste of time, I have to say it's truly a remarkable feat," Stussy exclaimed, looking at Noah's Ark with sunlight sprinkled on its surface. She had heard that in the legend of Fishman Island, this was a great ship that required several Super Sea Kings 5,000 meters long to pull. Hey. Garp was very proud in his heart, but he didn't think much of these government officials wearing black suits, so he picked his nose and said indifferently, "All right, I'll leave this ship to you. Take it wherever you want." After speaking, he looked at Dragon, grinned, and said, "Since we met, I'll go visit your place and see what the difference is between the police and the Marines. But this old man can only stay for one day. I have to go back to Fishman Island tomorrow." Dragon nodded. As long as his old father didn't drag him into some love training, everything would be fine. "Wait a moment, Minister Dragon." But just as the two father and son were about to leave together, Stussy called out to stop them. Their gazes turned towards her, and they saw her revealing a bright smile. "Since you're already here, that's perfect. This ship still needs your help. Could you please wait a moment?" "Help?" Dragon didn't understand what this meant. He cast his gaze towards his father, and seeing that Garp was also full of confusion, he could only restrain himself. At this moment, Stussy squatted down, placing her fair, manicured palm on the deck. Many, 50 times. She shouted loudly, fully activating her mini fruit ability. Bright yellow halos appeared on her palms, and instantly, the entire Noah's Ark, under everyone's gaze, turned into a relatively normal large wooden ship in the blink of an eye. "Ho!" Stussy slowly stood up, a hint of tiredness on her face, but she still forced herself to activate her ability one more time. Instantly, the entire ship shrank to a length of less than 30 centimeters. It was like an extremely exquisite sea ship model. At this point, her face turned pale, and large beads of sweat seeped from her forehead. This was because she hadn't eaten the fruit long ago, and her own stamina was also limited, causing her to only be able to activate 50 times twice within a day. "Minister Dragon, it's your turn." Chapter 218, Secrets and Rules. Inside the treehouse between the moon, Im looked at the latest reports sent by the 5 elders. Personally steering the world government was truly not an easy task. Although the trivial matters didn't require his attention, managing an entire planet, oh no, 2 planets, meant there were increasingly more things he needed to know. But he couldn't blame anyone but himself for causing so many things to happen this past year. Following his habit, Im first picked up the report regarding the Kabinarai world. The shogunate has basically been taken down. It seems the people below did a good job. Next is taking over the entire Hinamoto. In his view, the world government was currently in the investment phase for the Kabaneri world, investing in manpower, physical resources, financial resources, and other aspects. Only when Hinamoto was fully controlled and the local citizens were led to plant crops and mine various natural resources would it truly enter the harvest phase. Kabane Resource Regeneration Plan? Opening this document, whose very headline was somewhat chilling, Im read through it expressionlessly. Slowly, his gaze became increasingly solemn. Well done, 5 elders. Truly ruthless and vicious. Look at what was written on it. They wanted to try building a mechanized semi-automatic factory in the Kabaneri world that integrated functions like breeding, collection, processing, and transportation. If this attempt proved effective, they would build more Kabane factories, concentrating the Kabane in these factories, while also facilitating other departments in mining natural resources. It also stated that the existing Kabane would inevitably decrease over time, so a method to maintain their numbers was necessary. To be honest, as a young man who had only transmigrated 2 years ago, seeing such a dark, anti-human plan truly made him furrow his brow the entire time. He really hadn't thought about the so-called renewable resource issue. Before, he just thought that Kabane were already monsters, and utilizing their heart membranes was nothing. But now, the 5 elders were preparing to turn humans into Kabane when the existing Kabane were almost used up. They want me to sign this? Im immediately fell into a dilemma. He knew that once he signed and agreed, countless humans would be forced into factories and turned into Kabane in the future. But even he had to admit that the Kabane's heart membrane was indeed a biomaterial with the character black in its name, and crucially, it could indeed be mass-produced. Drip, drop, drip, drop, the antique clock face hanging on the wall kept rotating. 10 minutes passed, half an hour passed, an hour passed, 2 hours. Im hesitated for nearly 3 hours before raising his hand and picking up the fountain pen. Multiverse conquest concerns the fate of the entire C-Star world. If I don't do everything possible to constantly become stronger, one day we will be conquered by a stronger world. While comforting himself in his heart, he firmed his gaze and quickly signed the word agree on the document. After signing, Im pushed it aside without even looking at it and picked up the next file report. The subsequent content was all normal. Hold a government conference, internal disclosure of the Stargate. No problem. Still no progress on the Amber Lead disease? The Academy of Science has researched the optimal plan for embedding sea stone in the ship bottom. Also, the first blade to eat his own type devil fruit has appeared. Seeing this, Im knew that the munch fruit he gave Vegapunk had been effective. He figured that the shape memory alloy with its own lineage factor would also be developed soon. Did Kaido agree? It was smoother than expected. But can that guy really defeat Kazuki Oden? Im wasn't very confident about this point. According to his memory, Kaido seemed to have been defeated by Kazuki Oden, and only succeeded in a sneak attack from behind because Kirizumi Higurashi transformed into Momonosuke, distracting the latter. Kaido 20 years later would definitely be fine, but the current Kaido was still too green. Boruru, Boruru, the transponder snail rang. Lord Saint Nerona, your vehicle, Noah's Ark, has been pushed onto the sea surface by Admiral Garp. The relevant departments are arranging for its handling. The person on the other end was Stussy. Understood. You can come back now. Yes. Immediately after, Im called Saint Topman Warcurry and ordered. Have the giant god soldiers stand by in the plaza. I want to see them. Yes, Lord. After hanging up the handset, Im lowered his head and continued reading the file report. 2 hours later, on the social plaza of Pangaea Castle, the ground was, as always, covered with lush grass court. The tennis court named Holy Land also quietly sat there. Suddenly, a series of heavy footsteps sounded. The blades of grass on the ground trembled slightly. Moments later, 3 giants, nearly 20 meters tall, walked over, 1 in front and 2 behind. The one walking at the very front was wearing an oversized coat of justice. Brother Saul, why are you still wearing that clothing? Didn't you say you're not a Marine anymore? Oimo, walking on the left, asked with a smile. Because I want to carry justice and ask that Lord some things. Saul, whose face was covered in orange-red hair like a lion's mane, grinned, showing his teeth. His body size was 19.5 meters tall, a head taller than the 16-meter Oimo and 17-meter Kashi. In terms of strength, he was also the strongest as a giant vice admiral in the Marines. Therefore, even though the 3 had only met recently, these 2 giants from the former giant warrior pirates called him Big Brother. Huh, what's this? Kashi looked curiously at the Holy Land tennis court. In his eyes, it was just a blue square drawn on the grass. It looks like the main islands on the Grand Line are drawn on it. Look, our Elbaf is on it too. Olmo pointed to the court representing the New World and said with a smile. Saul, standing beside them, looked at it and fell silent. He knew what this thing was, and therefore understood even more clearly what it represented. So this is a celestial dragon. Step, 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 step. Suddenly, crisp footsteps sounded in the ears of the three. They were all excellent warriors, so their reaction was naturally not slow. Their 3 pairs of large, bell-like eyes simultaneously looked over. They saw that the approaching people were a man and a woman, a man in white clothing and a blonde woman in a black dress following behind him, slowly coming from inside the castle. Boom, when the giants' gazes met the man's eyes, they felt as if a huge explosion had occurred in their minds. A strong sense of fear surged up from the depths of their hearts. Saul's performance was better. Although his whole body trembled, he still stood rooted to the spot. However, Kashi and Doimo behind him retreated repeatedly, finally sitting down on the grass court with 2 loud noises. So this is the giant race? They're really big. Im stood with his hands behind his back, ignoring their disheveled posture, and instead observed their huge body size with interest. It was the first time he had seen such a magical race with his own eyes. I heard you have something you want to say to this saint? Im withdrew the oppressive feeling from his gaze and looked arrogantly at the quickly relaxing Saul. Behind him, Stasi quietly awaited orders. Yes. Saul swallowed. He didn't know why this celestial dragon, whom he was supposed to protect, had such a terrifying aura, but the obsession in his heart made him choose to ignore these things. I want to ask you, as a world noble, can you tell me why the world government is arresting those innocent scholars? They are just a group of unarmed scholars, why must you put them to death? The people I've arrested so far, in my opinion, they truly just wanted to understand past history. If their research is really that dangerous, couldn't the government just help them? I want to ask you, can you give me evidence that they are evil people? These questions, amplified by his giant race voice, truly gave a sense of power and echoed throughout the Holy Land. It even attracted Jayan and Mahuk, who were practicing swordsmanship nearby. But this also made Stussie's gaze towards him become dangerous. She angrily said, "Watch your attitude. How dare you be so disrespectful in front of Saint Nerona?" However, Im in front of her waved his hand, signaling her to be quiet, because he had specifically called Saul here precisely to change his fate. After all, he was a giant vice-admiral. What a waste it would be to lose him, especially on those scholars from O'Hara. What is history? Im looked at this kind giant vice-admiral with calm eyes, but the latter clearly didn't dare to meet his gaze, though this was insignificant. History is what happened in the past. History that is forbidden to be researched is past events that are not wanted, cannot, or are unwilling to be known by outsiders. If you view the world government as a person, then these are secrets that are not wanted to be known by others, and it has already been clearly stated externally that probing is rejected. Saul was stunned after hearing this. He hadn't expected the answer he received to be like this. Then he heard Saint Nerona ask him in return, "Do you have secrets you don't want others to know? If so, and someone is trying every possible way to probe your secrets even after you've clearly told them you don't want them probed, how would you feel?" This. Saul was left speechless by the question. This is from a human perspective. And from the perspective of law, researching poneglyphs is something the world government has explicitly forbidden. So, are they not breaking the law? But, according to this saint's knowledge, the world government has issued 3 explicit warnings to the scholars of O'Hara, forbidding them from continuing to explore and research poneglyphs. Yet they are still doing it. Is this not knowingly breaking the law? Im questioned back again. It is. Saul replied with a bitter expression, shaking his head. You are of the giant race, from the Elbaf kingdom. Does the Elbaf kingdom have its own laws? Yes. Saul nodded with difficulty. Kashi and Doimo behind him also nodded repeatedly. Then they heard him ask again. Then in the Elbaf kingdom, if someone knowingly breaks the law, will they receive punishment and sanctions? Yes. Yes. If you don't listen to the king, you'll be dragged to the duel arena and have your head cut off. Seeing Saul not speaking, Doimo immediately answered the question loudly, then added. But we call those things rules over there. Since that's the case, Saul, do you understand now why those scholars are being arrested? Im asked finally. I understand. Saul had nothing more to say. He could only look up at the sky, filled with emotion. After listening to the celestial dragon's questions one by one, he suddenly felt that the scholars of O'Hara were seeking their own demise. Because he truly couldn't find any problem with these words. They all sounded very reasonable, and he couldn't think of any counter-arguments. Yes, even humans have their own secrets, let alone the vast world government. Chapter 219, Blitz Style and Rage. Kubanrai World. After a bloody siege battle, the Tamari Station city gate was wide open. The city walls and ground were covered in scarlet bloodstains, But the troublesome corpses had long since been cleared away. Army soldiers, dressed in black uniforms and armed with heavy assault rifles, could be seen everywhere. Under the orders of the officers wearing black justice coats, they began taking over all the city defenses. On the city walls and between the streets, these black-clad warriors, exuding a formidable aura, were visible everywhere. Come out! Come out! Teams of 5 drove the citizens out of every house. Under the threat of muzzles, these men, women, old, and young, dressed in various kimonos, could only walk out trembling and then kneel on both sides of the street as ordered by the soldiers. Looking around, everyone in the entire fortress began kneeling on the ground, with occasional crying sounds from some children. However, the soldiers paid little attention to these children, maintaining a cold attitude that seemed to say, "If you want to cry, cry louder." Douglas Barrett had once told them that the key to conquest was combining grace and authority must come first, followed by grace. And their army was responsible for exerting authority. They didn't need to earn the gratitude or respect of these people, only their sufficient fear and terror. How do you make them feel fear and terror? It's very simple. Launch a direct frontal assault, completely subdue them, and eliminate all resistors who dared to pick up weapons in front of all the citizens, making them kneel on the ground and deeply experience despair and powerlessness. Only then would these talent not cause trouble or make a scene later, and obediently follow the arrangements. Therefore, whether it was this Tamari station, or the previous Sentai station and Kurokawa station, it was the same. After capturing the fortress, they would clear out all the samurai and officials, and then the citizens of the entire fortress would kneel for 5 hours under the surveillance of the army soldiers. This time was enough for the subsequent administrative personnel and technical personnel to arrive. They would then be responsible for management and distributing various food, which marked the beginning of the stage of bestowing grace. Although this approach was very bloody and ruthless and drew hateful gazes from many local citizens, it did have a good effect on the stability of order. After all, without samurai and officials, there were no leaders, and those who dared to resist and had the ability to resist were basically in the defending army. Once these soldiers were dead, most of the remaining people were those who only dared to curse in their hearts but obediently obeyed in their actions. Suddenly, the intense gunshots that had just subsided not long ago rang out again. This startled those who were moving slowly out of fear, making them jolt and quickly run, then drop to their knees with a thud, pressing even their foreheads tightly against the ground. In front of the city wall on the left side of the city gate, lay over 100 corpses or bodies turning into corpses, sprawled in a pool of blood. Across from them stood a line of army soldiers putting away their guns. It seemed the recent gunshots originated from them. Reporting, Vice Admiral. The last batch of Tamari Station samurai and soldiers have all been executed. There are also 32 arrested officials of various ranks. An army colonel appeared instantly with a swish, reporting loudly to the burly man with an extremely large body size. Okay, leave the officials for now. They will be handed over to Cypher Paul later. Is the chief steward here among them? Bullet sat on an oversized heavy motorcycle, lighting a similarly oversized, thick cigar for himself, and asked in a deep voice. The chief steward here is named Shiroyama Hirakata. According to the interrogation, he was killed on the city wall at the very beginning of the combat. That's truly an unlucky fellow. What about our casualty count? After asking, Bullet held the cigar between 2 fingers, exhaled a puff of smoke, and narrowed his eyes, looking down the main street that stretched endlessly into the depths of the inside the city. The dense crowd of citizens kneeling on both sides, combined with the lingering bloody smell in the air, was the best scenery in his eyes. Isn't his conquest? 123 killed in combat, 61 seriously wounded, 315 lightly wounded. As before, these were caused by being hit by steam guns during the wall climbing stage. Clearly, while the result of conquest was enjoyable, the process of conquest was also accompanied by sacrifice. Although army soldiers, being C-star people, had stronger physiques than the people of the Kabanari world, they hadn't reached the point of being invulnerable to weapons. Being hit in a vital point by a steam gun with high penetration power would still result in death. But if only non-vital areas were hit, it wasn't a big deal. Eating some meat and resting for a few days was enough to recover. That's about 20 fewer people than before, not bad. Bullet, upon hearing this, looked satisfied, completely unconcerned about the lives of the soldiers who had already sacrificed themselves. This was the effect he wanted. If no one died, it would instead be unpleasant. What kind of troop training would that be? From now on, we need to increase the difficulty of sieges. We must make the defending side use cannons. A siege without cannons to enhance the mood is a bit boring, don't you think? This. Yes. The army colonel broke out in a cold sweat but could only nod in agreement. Anyway, cannons were useless against officers like them, A cannonball shot at them could be split in half with a single blade. It's almost lunchtime. Let's see what the environment of the governor's mansion here is like. Bullet held the cigar in his mouth, biting it gently with his teeth, and started the motorcycle beneath him. Rumble rumble, pulu-pulu, pulu-pulu. Suddenly, just as the engine roared twice, the ringing sound of a transponder snail came from the pocket of his coat of justice. This made Bullet stop impatiently. Hello? This is Addison. Vice Admiral Bullet, you need to return to the base as soon as possible. The transponder snail, sitting on his extremely wide bomb, said solemnly. What's the matter? Hearing Bullet's somewhat aggressive tone, Senior Director Addison could only smile helplessly and then said. The 5 elders are preparing to hold a government conference in a month. Officials at bureau chief level and military officers at vice admiral level and above must attend. Admiral Akainu wants to meet with you and Vice Admiral Crocodile before then. Akainu. Isn't that the Marines' candidate admiral? Bullet frowned. He had a feeling that what the other party was about to say would make him very angry, extremely angry. Indeed. That's right. While you were away doing troop training, Admiral Akainu was transferred from the Marines to the Army and was promoted from Candidate Admiral to Army Admiral. Senior Director Addison didn't notice the change in atmosphere and introduced the situation thoroughly, but this caused Bullet's breathing to become heavy and rapid. The Army colonel beside him watched in terror as the big shot's expression turned extremely ugly, the rage in his eyes terrifying like a devil. This made him completely dare not move or even breathe deeply, his entire body's muscle completely stiff. A Marine's vice admiral comes to the Army and becomes an admiral? Then why can't I, this Army vice admiral, be promoted to admiral? Bullet's facial muscles pulled back to the sides as he glared ferociously at the transponder snail. I'd like to see what skill that red-haired dog has to be my superior. Senior Director Addison was stunned. He hadn't expected Bullet's reaction to be so strong, and that he would openly curse Admiral Akainu. Cough cough cough, anyway, that's the matter. You need to rush back to the base within 3 days. Admiral Akainu will come here on the 3rd day to meet with the 2 of you. Click. After saying everything in one breath, Addison directly hung up the transponder snail communication. He didn't want to get involved in the conflicts between these military brass. Bullet looked at the transponder snail that had closed its eyes and grinned sinisterly. Humphrey, I'll definitely be there on time. Go. Shoot all those officials. I want to hear a sound. Chapter 220, Crocodile vs. Douglas Barrett. 2 days later. Hinamoto now seemed to be in the peak of summer. Even though it was already past 2 in the afternoon, the wind felt like a heatwave hitting one's face. It was under such scorching temperatures that a large army in black, riding heavy motorcycles, arrived on the plains of Ojika County. The roaring noise startled the animals within several hundred meters, sending them scattering. They were in groups but orderly, with the distance between vehicles kept almost consistent. Enduring the exposure to the scorching sun, they carved trail after trail on the ground. Counting roughly, the number of people seemed to be around 1,000. Crocodile. Suddenly, a loud noise rolled in from the front. Its sound was so immense it even drowned out the engine noise of the nearly 1,000 heavy motorcycles. Soon, some people at the front of the convoy discovered a figure standing about 200 meters away, an extremely familiar figure. Douglas Barrett, Army Lieutenant General, their instructor. This guy. Crocodile narrowed his eyes and stopped his motorcycle. Having gotten somewhat used to Mima Amatori, 2.5 meters in height, standing beside him these past few days, Crocodile looked at Bullet's seemingly over 4-meter massive body size, his pupil shrinking in disbelief. Could it be that in the world called Planet C, giants like this are everywhere? Besides Crocodile, the rest of the army, get your asses back to base. Following Bullet's command, the nearly 1,000 army soldiers behind Crocodile exchanged glances. A moment later, they all controlled their throttles and quickly sped past on both sides. Although they could also feel the chill emanating from Crocodile, these people were still more in fear of Bullet, who had been training them for a while. As for the choice of these army soldiers, Crocodile completely ignored it, simply staring expressionlessly at Bullet 200 meters away. Aren't you leaving? At this moment, he spoke, addressing Mima Amatori, who was still standing there. The latter smiled slightly on his handsome face. This is my first time here. I don't know the way, so I'll go back with you. Ha ha. Ha ha. Crocodile was amused by him. He then took out a cigar from his pocket, lit it, and casually handed it to Mima Amatori. Then take this and stand far away. Smoke it while you watch. Consider it gaining experience. Alright. The latter naturally took the cigar. Although he didn't smoke and had never seen such a thing before meeting Crocodile. The next moment. The instant Mima Amatori took the cigar in his hand, Crocodile on the heavy motorcycle quickly transformed into an earth-yellow sandstorm, directly facing Douglas Barrett, who was charging over from the opposite side. Boom, two high-speed afterimages, one yellow and one blue, swept across 100 meters in the blink of an eye and collided violently. Crescent Dune. Great Cannon. The right arm, transformed by sand blade transformation, tore through the air and heavily struck the black fist, whose surface was glowing with a layer of blue light. Instantly, the two figures trembled. Energy surged wildly, turning into layers of visible ripples spreading in all directions. The moment these ripples touched the ground, the entire ground first shook violently, followed by dense cracks continuously appearing. Finally, after a loud noise, it completely cracked, faulted, and caved in. Stupid crocodile. I told you to take your men and attack Kongakaku head-on, didn't I? Bullet said with a ferocious smile, full of anger, while grappling with him. So? Crocodile sneered. You are a vice admiral, I am also a vice admiral. Can you still order me around? Then let's see today if I can order you. Bullet roared. Veins instantly bulged on his right arm, muscles knotted up, and he began pouring more strength into his fist. Huh? Crocodile's expression changed because he felt the fierce force coming from his arm. Bang! The next second, he was sent flying by a punch, soaring towards the high altitude like a cannonball. Meanwhile, Bullet showed no intention of stopping. Exerting force with his feet, he stomped and shattered the already cracked ground, erupting with a wild and ruthless dark blue aura. In an instant, he pushed through layers of air current explosions and chased after him. Bang! 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 Mima Amatori in the distance witnessed the most astonishing and jaw-dropping scene of his life. In the high altitude, Sir Crocodile and Douglas Barrett, both wearing black coats of justice, turned into streaks of afterimages chasing each other across the sky, engaging in fierce combat like flashes of lightning and sparks. Every collision between the two produced deafening explosions like metallic vibrations. Clusters of white mist exploded within sight, like flowers decorating the yellow sand and blue mist. If he weren't a Kabinerai, whose body had undergone a certain degree of enhancement, he wouldn't even be qualified to see the afterimages of both sides. Sandstorm. Crocodile's angry roar echoed through the sky, which had already become a battlefield. Whoosh 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 whoosh, suddenly, the sky darkened. A swirling sandstorm that grew with the wind appeared out of nowhere, pushing towards Bullet's location like a mountain toppling, sea overturning force. Playing with sand is worth shouting about? Douglas Barrett let out a sharp whistle. A deep blue force wave erupted from within him. This was his conqueror's hockey. He stretched his pitch-black arms forward, then opened his palms and grabbed forcefully. Vast energy surged out from his hands like mad. Accompanied by an earth-shattering explosion, the wild sand, which had expanded to seem like it connected the sky and ground, was actually torn apart by him using hockey and palm force. Desert Treasure Blade. At this instant, Crocodile seemed to have been prepared. Taking advantage of the moment Bullet's energy was depleted, he directly unleashed his most powerful single-target technique towards the latter's face. Transforming his arm again using sand blade transformation, like an extremely sharp slash, coated with streaks of purple lightning, he cleaved forward in a straight line. Combine. He just forgot that Bullet was also a devil fruit user. Rumble rumble rumble, the heavily cracked ground, under the influence of an invisible supernatural fluctuation, began rapidly gathering towards Bullet's side. Their formation speed was very fast. Just in time, a second before the Desert Treasure Blade arrived, it transformed into a rock giant nearly 20 meters tall, covered in a layer of armament hockey, its surface black with hints of blue. Duang, the enormous sand blade descended from the sky, slashing fiercely into the rock giant's chest like raging waves. A large amount of purple lightning scattered from the point of impact. Crack. Bullet, who was inside the giant controlling it, instantly noticed that the hockey on the body surface had been breached by 10 centimeters. This made him frown, and his gaze became solemn. What's with this technique? Why does the attack of a sand fruit user have lightning? But he immediately discovered that the Desert Treasure Blade that had cut into the chest had run out of force. This made Bullet's face show a cruel, ferocious smile. So it was only strong for an instant. The next second, Bullet controlled the combined rock giant, swinging its massive pitch-black palm to fiercely strike both sides of the sand blade. With a sudden boom, he instantly crushed it into a mass of sand on the spot. This. Crocodile in midair was dumbfounded. Whoosh, Douglas Barrett quickly detached from the rock giant, leaving the sound of the sonic boom behind him with lightning-like speed, and appeared above the former's head in the blink of an eye. In the end, your hockey is still weak. Boom, under a loud noise, Crocodile was sent flying downwards under Mima Amatori's shocked gaze, shattering the entire ground in that zone. A large amount of smoke and dust rolled up like an enraged dragon. Chapter 221, Bullet to be dealt with. Mima Amatori fell into deep thought. Logically, Since he had already decided to cling to the relatively familiar crocodile first, he should run over at this moment to help him up and then stand in front of him, facing that Vice Admiral Barrett. This way, he would definitely gain Crocodile's favor. However, despite thinking this, his body remained stubbornly motionless. The key was that he was sure Bullet wouldn't kill Crocodile, who was also a Vice Admiral, but he couldn't be sure he wouldn't kill himself. After all, strictly speaking, he wasn't really a member of the army yet. Therefore, after this series of deep considerations, Mima Amatori chose to give up this opportunity to gain favor. He believed there would always be other opportunities, but this life was one time only. For matter he wasn't confident about, he was used to choosing not to do. Boom. Bullet's terrifying body, like a giant golden-haired kuma, heavily smashed onto the ground like a cannonball. Without dissipating any strength, he instantly blasted the ground beneath him into broken rock block. Step, step, step. Heavy footsteps were particularly noticeable on the plain that had suddenly fallen silent. At this moment, a gust of wind quickly swept through, blowing away the thick black smoke and revealing Crocodile, who was kneeling on the ground. At this time, he looked very disheveled, his right hand clutching his faintly aching chest, scarlet blood dripping from the corner of his mouth, panting heavily as he glared angrily at the approaching Bullet. Sand Crocodile, I give you a warning. In this army, I am above, you are below. My words are the highest order. Douglas Barrett at this moment was like a proud lion king, looking at the crocodile in the pit he had just defeated, uttering this extremely oppressive declaration. Ha! I think your brain is completely filled with muscle. But Crocodile, though defeated in battle, did not lose in spirit. He responded with an arrogant and unruly sneer on his face. Only he understood the anger in his heart. Part of the anger was directed at the arrogant Bullet before him, but more of it was directed at his own incompetence and weakness. Just a few years ago, he could completely handle this guy. Not to mention defeating him, being evenly matched was definitely not a problem. But now, his desert treasure blade couldn't even break through this bastard's surface defense. And, his observation hockey couldn't even reaction in time to the speed and strength that erupted from Bullet's final blow. After this exchange of blows, Crocodile had deeply realized that there was a significant gap in armament hockey, observation hockey, physical strength, and burst speed between the two sides. As for the development and training of Devil Fruit ability, he did indeed have a certain advantage, but without awakening, it was difficult to achieve much effect with just this point. Looks like you still need a beating. A dangerous cold radiance flickered in Bullet's gaze, and a heart-palpitating, vast aura once again emanated from his body. Crocodile also stood up, his two arms rapidly undergoing element transformation, glaring fiercely at the former's movements. The atmosphere instantly became heavy. Stop it, both of you. Idiots. Just when the three people present thought the second round of battle was about to erupt, a majestic roar accompanied by rumbling air current, like a flying fire meteorite, smashed onto the empty space between the two sides. Boom. Like a massive explosion, a wave of red light carrying a scorching aura swept out in all directions, blowing Bullets and Crocodile's black justice coat almost straight. Even Mima Amatori, who was watching from a distance, had to use his arm to shield his face. Despite this, he still felt like he was hit by a wall pushing towards him, and at the same time, a wave of high-temperature air current carrying a sulfurous smell rushed at his face, causing him to feel a sense of suffocation for a moment. Who is this again? Mima Amatori had begun to suspect that the so-called Sea Star world was actually the legend divine realm, and that Crocodile, Bullet, and the big shot who just appeared were actually deity. Their physique, which was far higher than that of normal human, and their world-shattering ability and strength were almost indistinguishable from the descriptions in myth. Indeed. When Mima Amatori waited for the heatwave to pass and finally saw the appearance of the newcomer, he couldn't suppress the shock in his heart and muttered in a low voice. Is this the god of magma? Or the god of volcanoes? The fierce man who descended from the sky looked taller than Crocodile, but slightly shorter than Douglas Barrett. The key was the magma flowing freely on his body, the viscous magma dripping down from time to time, and the rolling gunfire flash and black smoke rising up. At first glance, he didn't look like a normal human. Mima Amatori had always thought that his existence as half-human, half-Cabane was special enough, but now it seemed he hadn't escaped the level of mortals. Perhaps only by becoming a new would I be qualified to stand with them. Douglas Barrett saw the newcomer and grinned, laughing sinisterly. I've seen you before, the candidate admiral of the Marines, the one with the epithet Kainu, Sakazuki, right? I was just about to find you for a good chat. I didn't expect you to deliver yourself to my doorstep. Good, good. Sakazuki looked at this guy who exuded a brutality aura all over, his gaze filled with disgust and contempt. Putting on a military uniform still can't hide the pirate stench on you. Fine, I originally wanted to teach you a lesson before the government conference, to make you understand how to be a qualified soldier. Crocodile behind him also showed displeasure upon hearing this, as he was also from a pirate background. Wasn't this cursing him along with them? At this moment, Sakazuki was seen moving his body, and without turning his head, he declared in a deep voice. Come at me, both of you. But if you two don't have any skill, I can't guarantee I won't kill you. Boom. You mongrel dog, try it. Douglas Barrett roared angrily, his muscle instantly swelling, veins popping out. A deep blue conqueror's hockey erupted from his body, transforming into rolling air current that scattered in all directions. Even the broken ground around them began to tremble violently, rock block jumping up under the energy. The next second, after a loud noise like an explosion, he was seen covered in a layer of black-blue armament hockey from head to toe, transforming into a blue beam that rushed towards Sakazuki's face. His eyes shot out truthless, cold, and brutal radiance. This was his devil form. Is this all you've got? Sakazuki seemed unfazed by such terrifying and violent aura, but more magma surged from his right hand, and even the surrounding air twisted due to the sharply increased high temperature. Hellhound. His magma-transformed arm rapidly extended and shot out with astonishing attack speed, colliding in an instant with Bullet's pitch-black right hand, which had accumulated strength to the extreme and was wrapped in layers of intense air current. One condensed monstrous physical strength and incredibly fierce armament hockey. One contained the explosive impact strength comparable to a real volcano, representing the highest attack strength among devil fruit ability. Who was strong? Boom. Amidst an indescribable explosion roar, the red light of the massive magma eruption intertwined with the deep sea-like black-blue radiance, pushing the surrounding air and the layers of rock and soil beneath their feet outwards like a collapsing mountain and overturning sea. Mima Amatori was completely dumbfounded. He could only watch as the soil wave, dozens of meters high, swept towards him. Fortunately, at this moment, a massive yellow sandstorm rolled him up and quickly carried him away from this battlefield that was about to turn into hell. Vice Admiral? Crocodile, who carried Mima Amatori to high altitude, sneered repeatedly. Watch, that bastard Bullet is about to be dealt with. Chapter 222, A Performance Class on Logia Awakening. It was as if a small sun appeared on the ground and exploded, its fiery red radiance like an expanding overturned bowl. Even at high altitude, Mima Amatori could still feel the painful heat wave, scorching his skin, especially the dense sulfur smell, which was almost suffocating. In his eyes, the ground that had just undergone earth dragon rolling was visibly turning into a lava swamp at a speed visible to the naked eye, with scorching lava flow rushing everywhere. As expected, has this guy's ability awakening occurred? Crocodile, maintaining his semi-element transformation, watched the ground below undergo such a supernatural and drastic change, his narrowed eyes revealing desire and envy. As for Douglas Barrett, the person involved, at this moment, he only had one feeling, heat beyond imagination. Even with armament hockey, hardening covering his entire body, he could still faintly feel a scorching pain. Especially his right fist, which had just collided head-on with that hellhound, its surface was now completely red. But the greatest pain still came from the magma attached to his arm. He found that this kind of magma was different from flame, and even different from normal magma in nature. Okainyo's magma, when stuck to the body, continuously emits high temperature, and this high temperature has terrifying permeability. Even hockey cannot completely block it. Boom, seeing the lava giant fist smashing down again, Bullet's expression became extremely ugly. He could only suppress his emotions reaching the extreme of rampage and choose to retreat and evade. The current situation he faced was that if he continued to clash head-on with Sakazuki, more magma would stick to him. Because of this, he didn't even dare to use his combine fruit ability now. This zone had already turned into a rolling lava pool. If he used his ability, it would be equivalent to burying himself alive in magma, which would definitely be seeking his own death. So how should he fight? Actually, there was a way. 24 years later in the original timeline, Teacher Kaido personally demonstrated by transforming into a fire dragon capable of incinerating everything, teaching Monkey D. Luffy how to fight Sakazuki. The method was very simple. Using the emission technique of armament hockey, also known as Ryao in Wano country, one could attack without touching the high-temperature magma or flame. But the problem was, Bullet at this stage didn't know this technique. Because he boarded the ship with the identity of a challenger. For 3 years, he only thought about constantly challenging Roger and challenging the other crewmates on the ship. In the end, he defeated everyone except Roger, feeling that even the vice captain really could only fight him to a draw. This directly resulted in him not being very popular in the Roger pirates. No one was willing to actively teach him these things. Being strong didn't mean knowing all the techniques. It's worth mentioning. In the original timeline, Douglas Barrett was suspected to have been defeated by Sakazuki and captured into Impel Down, because at the time of the Stampede operation, the current fleet admiral of the Marines was precisely Sakazuki. However, some people believe it wasn't Sakazuki being referred to, but Fleet Admiral Sengoku from 20-something years ago. But who it actually was remains unknown. How can you defeat me when you can't even fight back? Brat. Bullet, who had just dodged a great eruption attack and was rapidly flying backward amidst layers of sonic boom, heard a sharp voice suddenly ring in his ear, and his expression drastically changed. How is that possible? Wasn't he in front? My observation hockey. But he didn't have time to think. Just as he was about to turn around to counterattack or use defense, an unbearable sharp pain and needle-like burning sensation came from his back. Boom, Bullet was like someone hit by a point-blank volcanic eruption. Amidst the large area of splashing lava flow, his entire body burned with raging flame, crashing headfirst like a flying fire meteor into the side of a relatively intact hill on the other end. Is this also a Logia awakening ability? Although Bullet below didn't see clearly what happened, Crocodile, who was at high altitude with a bird's eye view, saw it very clearly. At that moment, Sakazuki, in his completely element transformation magma form, shot out from the lava pool behind Bullet as a beam of red light, heavily striking Bullet's back. At the same time, the Sakazuki in the distance quickly faded and melted into a puddle of magma, merging into the environment. It was clear that Admiral Akainu had just passed through the magma ground at an incredible speed, so fast that even Bullet's observation hockey didn't have time for a reaction. Sakazuki. At this moment, the hill that had swallowed Bullet began to tremor violently, followed by streaks of deep blue radiance shining through the cracks. Bang! The next moment, the entire hill completely exploded from within, revealing a giant black man with streaks of magma flowing over his body, simultaneously enveloped by a dark blue glow. Boom! Bullet, with bloodshot eyes and blood at the corner of his mouth, roared and charged forward. The rock formation beneath his feet violently tremored and burst, and large amounts of gravel and debris, accompanied by energy, exploded outwards like cannonballs. He had completely gone rampage. Sakazuki's heavy blow just now had completely ignited his ferocity. At this moment, Bullet had lost all basic rationality. Completely ignoring the continuous burning pain caused by the high-temperature magma attached to his body, he pushed forward, pressing against layers of visible chi wall, and instantly appeared before Sakazuki. Die for me, just a wild beast. Sakazuki snorted coldly, raised his arms which had already turned into rolling magma, and blasted them out. But this time, Bullet showed no intention of evading. Even if I die, I'll pull off a handful of dog fur. Bullet's thick, cannon-like arms swung into dense dark blue after images. Every punch could create a misty, circular wave in the air. Bang 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 bang, the overwhelmingly fierce fist wind filling the sky clashed against the lava fire fists capable of melting everything into ash. Blue light and red light completely covered the entire magma ground. This guy. Sakazuki was surprised to find that Bullet seemed to have found a way to clash head-on with him. He was actually relying entirely on brute force to unleash surging punching wind waves, constantly forcing back the approaching viscous magma, and then performing a second burst to make his fists pass through the air current layer and hit his main body. This approach clearly required Bullet to use his full strength and definitely couldn't last for long. His combat talent is indeed astonishing, but unfortunately, his foundation is still too poor. For this combat that would determine his status in the army, Sakazuki never considered losing, which made his gaze towards Bullet become dangerous. I must completely beat this pirate brat into submission. Admiral Akainu, who had transferred to the army, no longer held back and began to fully unleash the power of the magmag fruit within him. If you die like this, you can only blame your own capacity for being nothing more than this. Bang. 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 The next moment, pillar after pillar of high lava flow erupted from the lava pool around Sakazuki and Bullet. Subsequently, they rapidly transformed into one after another magma hounds made entirely of magma. This scene was like summoning a great army of messengers from the abyss of hell. Hound blaze. With the former's angry roar, all the magma hounds bared their sharp teeth dripping with magma and pounced on Bullet from all directions. So that's how it is. After Logia awakening, one can also control the external elements? At high altitude, Crocodile, holding the completely stunned Mima Amatori, muttered thoughtfully to himself. Then if I awaken, wouldn't I be invincible in the desert? It must be said that Sakazuki's combat had allowed him to touch the gate of awakening in advance. At the same time, he also realized that the outcome of this combat would be decided soon. Thinking of this, he had no interest in seeing the final scene and directly transformed into Sandstorm with the subordinate he had just taken in, and left. God knows if Admiral Akainu will really bite at him like a mad dog afterward. Chapter 223, Hinamoto's Alliance Expedition. A clean and tidy room, with bright sunlight spilling in from outside the window. This is. When Bullet opened his eyes again, he was first a little dazed by the piercing light, Then he clearly saw the white ceiling, but he was immediately awakened by the burning pain on his body. Looking around and at his own situation, the thick white quilt on his body, the smell of disinfectant in the air, and the bandages wrapped around his upper body, all seemed to prove it was a hospital room. Bullet endured the pain and sat up, his thoughts, however, sinking into memories. Soon, the magma land filled with gunfire flash appeared in his mind. Did I still lose? A low, unwilling murmur sounded in the room. He still couldn't withstand the continuous pouncing and biting of the magma hounds, and Sakazuki's immensely powerful magma fist strikes. There are actually so many guys stronger than me in this world. All this time, Bullet always felt that the only monsters in this world who could defeat him were those from the same era as Roger, such as Garp and Whitebeard. The one he met at Pangaea Castle back then was just an old monster from an even earlier generation in his eyes. But now, the appearance of Sakazuki, this former Navy Admiral candidate, now an Army Admiral, made him realize that he might have truly been a frog in a well before. Thinking carefully. There are 3 Navy Admiral candidates. Besides this Ikainu, there are also Kizaru and Okiji. This means there are 2 more people who can defeat him. Who knows how many such powerhouses there are in the world government, and how many are overseas. Damn it, I'm not strong enough yet, but I will definitely catch up. Sooner or later, I will knock down every single one of these guys above me. Knock knock knock, just as Bullet was gritting his teeth and swearing, the door was suddenly knocked on from the outside. Immediately after, Senior Director Addison walked in and smiled. It seems you're recovering well. We can finally send some good news to Marshal Raymond. How long did I sleep? Bullet asked in a deep voice with an ugly expression. His voice sounded very hoarse, because the previous scorching high temperature had even injured his throat. Only 3 days. Senior Director Addison sat on the chair by the bed and casually picked up an apple, throwing it to Bullet. Have one, it'll moisten your throat. The latter took the apple and bit into it without ceremony. With that one bite, he directly bit off more than half of the fruit's flesh. His eating was truly terrifying. Did you know, when Marshal Raymond heard you were beaten to near death, he flew into a rage and fiercely cursed Admiral Ikainu in front of all of us? Bullet asked. Where is he? He left, returned to the homeland. Said he'd curse him again after going back. Senior Director Addison smiled. Hey. Bullet curled his lip in disdain. He was almost beaten to death, and then Sakazuki was just cursed twice. How perfunctory. Alright, what do you need me for? Perhaps even he didn't notice that his temper now was much more restrained compared to before. At least the arrogance on his face had significantly decreased. Addison was naturally happy to see this change. He had always felt that Bullet's personality was too impulsive and too arrogant. It's like this. The news that the shogunate replaced the general with a female shogun has spread. Now, the chief stewards in various places of this country, in the name of restoring amatory orthodoxy, have sent an alliance subjugation order to Kongakaku. When speaking of serious matters, Senior Director Addison's smile disappeared, and he looked at Bullet with a very serious gaze. Although the latter's appearance, completely wrapped in bandages, wasn't very pleasant to look at, no matter what, the other party was also a military commander representing the army. Huh? A subjugation order? Bullet was immediately amused by these words. He laughed so hard his whole body trembled, even irritating the wounds under the bandages, but this bit of pain was nothing. Tell me, what is their influence like? Senior Director Addison recalled the intelligence he had seen before and introduced it to Bullet with a serious expression. We have discussed with Yatsugawa Ayam and Mima Amatori. So far, a total of 12 regional chief stewards have joined this alliance army: Hitachi, Masashi, Kazuki, Shinano, Ekigo, Kaka, Kita, Mino, Mikawa, Kei, Dua, and Nodo. Mima Amatori specifically pointed out that the Torai army from Ekigo and the Genro army from Shinano have the strongest military power. Their military strength both reached 5,000. Among them, the Genro army's strength is even greater because they possess a garrison cannon called Narukami. It is said to be the cannon with the largest caliber in all of Hinamoto and was once used for the elimination of over 3,000 Kabanrai world in the Masashi region. It is very famous. Speaking of this, he paused for a moment before speaking again. In other words, we will have to face at least 12 iron armored trains, over 40,000 military strength, hundreds of cannons and mortars, and one Narukami cannon said to be able to blast through the city wall of a station with a single shot. The reason I say at least is because more regional chief stewards might join later, and the final total military strength could exceed 50,000. However, Senior Director Addison found himself speechless, realizing that despite speaking so heavily and seriously, Bullet, sitting on the bed, had a smile on his face that grew brighter and brighter, and the excitement in his gaze almost turned into flames, because the war he wanted had finally arrived. Isn't this great news? These rabble have gathered together and delivered themselves right to our doorstep. It's perfect for sweeping them all clean." As he spoke, he tore apart the bandages binding his body, revealing his bare chest covered in burn scars. These scars brought an even stronger burning pain as soon as they came into contact with the air. From this perspective, it is indeed good news. But we currently only have 5,000 army soldiers. Mima Amatori estimates that the Alliance Expeditionary Force will reach the vicinity of Kongakaku in 5 days at the latest. It also takes over a day to travel from this base to Kongakaku. Even if we immediately transfer more people from the homeland, the Stargate's width is only enough to send in a few thousand more soldiers. As a high-ranking official of the world government, Addison's worry was naturally not because he hadn't seen powerhouses from the homeland, but because he deeply understood that the Army's purpose was troop training. Under special circumstances, combat power of too high a rank would not be deployed. There wouldn't even be many officer-level combat power. So, basically, they can only rely on the lower-ranked soldiers to deal with this Alliance Expeditionary Force. In this situation, fighting against an army of over 50,000 with a military strength of less than 10,000, the uncertainty is indeed very high. Because facts have proven that even army soldiers will still be injured and die if hit by a steam gun, not to mention the hundreds of cannons and mortars over there. The physical ability advantage can only be demonstrated when both sides engage in close combat. In the gunfight and artillery battle before that, there's a feeling of uselessness. If they lose in the end, that would be a huge joke. Good heavens, the world government's first war against an other world ended in defeat? In that case, even if Bullet takes action and wipes out the other side, it would be useless. The reputation that has already been lost would be more or less stained even if picked back up. Humphrey, war isn't a game for children. We must wait for both sides to set up their situation. Bullet, standing up again, his sturdy body nearly 4 meters tall, truly brought considerable pressure to Senior Director Addison, who could only subconsciously take a few steps back. Oh right, where's that guy Crocodile? Only then did he remember that defeated foe. Vice Admiral Crocodile has already returned to the homeland to undergo training at Cypherpol headquarters. Senior Director Addison said helplessly. Bullet snorted coldly. It's better that he's gone. What about that Mima Amatori? Did he go with him? No, he didn't. Original copy, Vice Admiral Crocodile wanted to take him back to the homeland, but he chose to stay, citing that he didn't want to miss this opportunity to obtain military merit. Hey, what a smart kid. I thought he was just another idiot who only knew how to play petty tricks. Chapter 224, Drive the World Government Out of Hinamoto. Wakamatsu Station. This place recently gained prominence among Hinamoto's higher-ups because it was chosen as the headquarters of the Alliance Expeditionary Force. It belongs to Hidden Stones Village, Shiro County, and together with Hidden Stones Village, Iki County, where Kongakaku is located, they are the southernmost parts of the Mutsu region, neighboring each other to the left and right. Perhaps some might find it unfamiliar, but if it is said that it will be part of Fukushima Prefecture in the future, separated from Fukushima City only by the Abukama River, then it will surely become much more familiar. For this reason, Wakamatsu Station is currently at full capacity. Too many Iron Fortress trains have had to line up and park on the same track. Furthermore, with over 40,000 troops gathered in one city, many soldiers still have to live in temporarily erected tents, which almost filled the entire city as far as the eye could see. Soldiers carrying steam guns and wearing uniforms of various colors were everywhere on the streets. The scenery here is really nice. What a beautiful thing it would be to have the lake as a companion. 12 men of extraordinary temperament, of various heights and builds, wearing luxurious robes, gathered on the city wall. One of them, dressed in an emerald green robe, looked at the lake in the distance, which was like a blue mirror, and sighed with emotion. Guarding them were dozens of samurai, and judging from their attire and strong physiques, they were all high-rank samurai without exception. Not at all, not at all. Steward Kozo of Wakamatsu Station quickly replied with a fawning smile. Although Lake Inawashiro is nice, how can it compare to the scenery over in Shinano? You overpraise me. Exactly. Who doesn't know that the Kabanari world in Shinano has long been cleared out? It's said that crops are even planted outside the city. That scenery is truly beautiful. Indeed, although this lake is beautiful, it is still far inferior to the golden rice fields. It turned out that the person who had just spoken was Steward General of Shinano Station, and also the initiator of this alliance expedition. Therefore, the other chief stewards all gathered around him, chatting and laughing. This person had a high nose, a long face, sharp gaze, and a straight waist, possessing a rather strong military aura. This aura was somewhat different from a samurai aura, more like that of a modernized military officer. Perhaps this was also related to his deep connections with Europa. Humphrey, stop talking nonsense. With this time, quickly discuss how we're going to fight. We didn't come here to look at the scenery. At this moment, a rather unsociable voice filled with impatience rang out, instantly cooling down the lively atmosphere that had been built up among everyone present. But despite this, no one dared to speak out to mock this big shot, who was clad in bright red armor and dressed like a Sengoku period military commander. Although his height was short, his strong muscle was genuine. Lord Toraku also has a point. Except for the chief steward from Duwa, all the chief stewards who should be here have arrived. Steward Genro showed not the slightest expression of anger. Instead, he nodded in agreement, turning his back to the city wall and a large expanse of lake and forest, and said to everyone, "I will emphasize the purpose of this alliance once more, to overthrow the false shogunate established by Yatsugawa Ieyasu, who killed General Amatori and usurped the position of general, and to drive that so-called world government out of Hinamoto." As soon as his voice fell, Superintendent Huowo, who was said to be a descendant of the Tiger of K, asked in a deep voice. According to the last intelligence transmitted from Kongakaku, this world government claims to be a united government composed of over 170 overseas countries. What do you think? Hearing this, the other chief stewards had clearly received similar intelligence, and thus their gazes all carried a hint of hesitation and worry. That is false. Steward Genro gave a direct response. His expression was very firm, giving people a sense of inexplicable trust. I have obtained accurate news through a cargo ship from England. There is no such thing as a world government overseas at all, so everyone has no need for any worry. So that's how it is. Everyone sighed in relief. Superintendent Huowo's gaze became even more chilling and terrifying. He said angrily, "Yatsugawa Ieyasu actually colluded with a group of overseas swindlers to rebel against the shogunate. She truly deserves death 10,000 times over for her crime. What are we waiting for then? Let's set off now and take down Kongakaku, and then hang them all at the city gate." Another chief steward from Ekizan shouted. "I heard that Ieyasu is not yet 20 years old this year, a tender young girl. What a ways to hang her, hee cough cough, then I must certainly get a good look." Steward Genro was also very pleased in his heart to see his allies' morale greatly boosted. Once Kongakaku was taken down, then as the strongest chief steward present, this admiral position would belong to him. Since that is the case, let's discuss the order of deployment. After all, there are only 4 railways leading from here to Kongakaku, and so many of our Iron Fortress trains cannot depart together. Then let's divide into 3 teams. Superintendent Huowo's stern tone gradually brought everyone into a state of readiness for battle. I heard that Hidden Stone's village tow station in front of Kongakaku was attacked by black smoke not long ago, and the city wall was breached. It should not have had time to repair it by now. I think we should send 1 team to set off tonight and take it down. After speaking, he took a step forward, scanned the entire scene with his tiger eyes, and said resolutely, "I want 1 spot in the first team." The chief stewards looked at each other, yet no one raised an objection, because they felt that even if they departed in the first batch, it didn't necessarily mean they would be the first batch to enter Kongakaku. After all, Kongakaku is also the shogunate capital, the strength of the city defenses is definitely the highest in the country. To take it down, they could only wait until the whole army arrived. But if it's this person... Everyone's gaze gradually shifted to Steward Genro. The latter smiled slightly, knowing what they were thinking in his heart. Our Genro army will be the 3rd batch. I'll trouble everyone to clear out the Kabanari world along the way first. Ha ha, you can rest assured. Superintendent Huowo patted the red armor on his chest and laughed heartily. Then he immediately turned and walked down the city wall to prepare, leaving the others to continue discussing the other 3 spots in the first batch. Night fell, the bright moon shone high, and accompanied by the cool evening wind, 4 iron-armored trains, entirely white but with unique characteristics in the details, slowly drove out of Wakamatsu station along the railway amidst the whooshing whistle sound. I really didn't expect that the Amatori family, known as Birds Soaring High, Amatori Unshakable, which ruled Japan for over 200 years, would just end like this. In Kai Castle, Superintendent Huowo, carrying a specially made steam gun that could be used for shooting and also for battle axe chopping, looked at the lake under the moonlight in the distance and sighed with emotion. Highness, this precisely proves that there is no dynasty in the world that can last for 1,000 years. It's time for this shogun family to be replaced by another. The deputy general beside him, also wearing brown Japanese-style armor, chuckled lightly. It's just that our opponents are not so easy to deal with. The Genro army doesn't just have that Narukami in their hands. They also have over 100 cannons, and they are all Western goods. Their power is 1 or 2 levels greater than ours. Superintendent Huowo sighed heavily with a heavy heart. In his opinion, the biggest difficulty of this operation was not how to take down Kongakaku, but in the admiral struggle that followed. Highness, cannons are indeed very powerful from a distance, but at close range, they can't hit anyone. According to the previous plan, we, as the first team to attack Hidden Stone's village tow station, will have a reason to stay in the rear when we reach Kongakaku. As long as Narukami blasts open the city gate, and then the front troops enter inside the city, then we will directly launch a siege on the Genro army, annihilate them and seize Narukami. By then, even if the other chief stewards enter the city first, it will be useless. Instead, they will have eliminated the so-called world government for us. This deputy general chuckled smugly, because this strategy was proposed by him. Who would have thought that the Torai army, always known for being reckless, would have a strategist like me appear? Ah, I hope everything goes smoothly. Superintendent Hulwo said with a heavy heart. He didn't know why, but ever since setting off, he had had a feeling of unease. Could it be that Gai Zhuanlu is also scheming something in secret? Chapter 225, First War Against the Other World. Hidden Stone's village Shiro is a place where nearly 70% is covered by forest, and the remaining 30% is plain. The entire terrain is a basin, so the edge areas have higher elevations. If an iron fortress wants to travel to other regions, it must pass through a section of mountainous and valley filtering-shaped terrain before entering Hidden Stone's village Iki County. This kind of place is also the most dangerous zone for the iron fortress. There are always many Kabanrai world jumping down from high places, fearlessly and heavily smashing onto the outer armor. Although most would splatter into blood and flesh upon impact, with such large numbers, there would always be some lucky ones who could stick to the roof and then use their brute force to hammer through the cabin door and run in to bite people. However, based on past experience, the Torai army, who were standing by in strict formation inside Kai Castle, found that there were no sounds of impact, roaring, or flesh tearing outside the train. What's the situation? Superintendent Hulwo, located at the front of the train, saw that there were no Kabanrai world blocking the track ahead, his face filled with surprise and astonishment. His gaze turned to the deputy general beside him. But the latter was also completely bewildered. Could it be that all the Kabanrai world in this place are dead? Perhaps. Superintendent Hulwo stopped thinking about it, revealing a hearty smile. Finally, a night where I can sleep without seeing blood. This is a good omen. He felt that being able to pass through the dangerous zone smoothly was definitely a good thing. However, they didn't know that as the Kai Castle quickly drove away, black-clad soldiers emerged from the dense forest on the high slopes on both sides behind them, watching their backs with cold expressions. TCH. Bullet's abnormally huge body size appeared, casting a large shadow behind him in the moonlight. A clear look of displeasure was on his face as he spat towards the departing Kai Castle. It's not the Narukami Castle. Looks like we still have to wait. Hide well. If anyone gets discovered, don't blame me for twisting off their head. Hearing the big shot's order, all the army soldiers retreated back into the darkness of the forest. How are things on your side? Bullet took out a transponder snail and called the army colonel responsible for the other line, asking. Report, a train just passed, but it wasn't the Narukami Castle. Keep watching. Once the target is spotted, intercept it immediately and wait for support from other troops. But let all the previous trains go. Yes, Vice Admiral. Immediately after, Bullet called the officers on the other two lines in sequence, and the results were all the same. Ever since learning that the military strength of the Alliance Expeditionary Force was several times their own, Bullet had buried his conflicts with Sakazuki deep in his heart and quickly entered a state of war. After gathering intelligence from various sources, he discovered that this so-called Alliance Expeditionary Force didn't come from all directions as he had imagined, but from two directions. One was the Yuuzhan army from the northern front, and the other was the Alliance main force from the southern front. The most interesting thing was that there were only a total of 12 railways leading to Kongakaku. 4 of them led to the south, and 4 to the north, but only one railway directly connected to Yuuzhan Station. So, with the time clear and the location clear, how should they fight? Ambush. Bullet directly led 8,000 army divided into 5 battalions. The team he was responsible for had a military strength of only 1,000, while the other 3 battalions each had 2,000 military strength. The final 1,000-man unit was left to Mima Amatori to guard Hidden Stone's village tow station. The damaged city wall of Hidden Stone's village tow station had long been restored to its original state by him using his combine fruit ability. The process was simple. First, combine the entire city wall with himself, then reconstruct the damaged parts, and finally detach from the inside. Besides 1,000 army, Mima Amatori also had 3,000 surviving original Kongakaku soldiers. Fortunately, they encountered Crocodile. If they had encountered the army led by him, they would have been killed long ago. Coupled with the 100 cannon that Kiyu Amatori had purchased from overseas before, combined with the dozens of meters high city wall, He believed that holding out for a period of time would definitely not be a problem. And his primary objective here was to destroy the Narukami cannon of the Shinano Front Army. Although he didn't know if this thing could truly penetrate a city wall with one shot, it did sound somewhat interesting, bringing a hint of anticipation to Bullet, who enjoyed the game of war. According to Mima Amatori's introduction, Narukami was actually an automatic cannon mounted on an iron-armored train. The cannon barrel was over 4 meters long, and the caliber was a full 480 millimeters. It was very easy to recognize. Woo-woo-woo, indeed, it was very easy to recognize. As the ambushing crowd let another iron-armored train pass, about 2 hours later, they finally waited for a white train with a super-large cannon on top. Seeing it, Bullet split his big mouth into a bloodthirsty grin like a demon, and at the same time took down the black spear he was carrying on his shoulder. In order to achieve the goal of troop training, he couldn't easily make a move, but he also wanted to personally join the combat and experience the long-lost thrill of battlefield slaughter. So, he specifically requested a heavy sniper rifle, and the ammunition loaded was the first batch of jet bullets newly reformed by Ikema, the protagonist of this world. As mentioned before, even when used with ordinary steam guns, these jet bullets could penetrate a 10-centimeter steel plate, and when hitting a Kabanari world, they could send it flying 3 or 4 meters away. Now, after being reformed and loaded into the Bullet. Good luck. His operation plan was very simple: first destroy the strongest part of the Alliance army, and then deal with those they had let pass, one by one, from the rear. To achieve this, Bullet only transferred 3,000 previously trained soldiers from the army headquarters in the homeland these past few days. All the remaining time was spent pulling rocket launchers, mortars, heavy machine guns, and various ammunition. The 3,000 army who came in brought these things with them. The rest were pulled in on 2-meter-wide wooden carts. This directly resulted in all the soldiers ambushing on site holding these things in their hands. As for the heavy assault rifles, they were left at the base because they were cumbersome, but everyone had a long saber hanging from their waist. Because everyone had heavy motorcycles, the load capacity and mobility of the entire troops were very sufficient. There was also transponder snail providing instant communication, allowing Bullet to know which line encountered Narukami immediately. On the other hand, the Alliance Expeditionary Force. Although telephone already existed within Hinamoto, they were wired telephones, only capable of rapid communication between station and station. There was no such thing between these iron-armored trains, so even if one was attacked midway, no one would know until the subsequent trains arrived. It could be said that although Bullet's side had fewer military strength, their equipment had already been modernized, while the other side was still stuck in the 19th century. Click-clack, click-clack, click-clack. As the Narukami castle rushed over with its turning wheels and noise, Bullet didn't shout any order to open fire. Instead, he directly aimed the bullet in his hand at the front of the train and pulled the trigger. Bang! Instantly, a loud noise like a heavy cannon overwhelmed all the sounds made by the iron-armored train. This gunshot was the order to open fire. Da-da-da-da-da, shoo-shoo-shoo. The next moment, countless bullets fired from the high-ground forest on both sides of the track formed a dense, crisscrossing firepower net, accompanied by hundreds of shells whistling sharply and covering the area like a deluge. Boom. 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 Boom, explosions and gunfire flashes soaring into the sky, and the incessant heavy machine gun sounds completely lifted the curtain on the world government's first war against an other-world civilization. Chapter 226, Fierce Battle Between Both Sides Under the Night Sky. 10 minutes ago, inside Narukami Castle. The environment inside this iron fortress was quite rough. Everywhere the eye could see were undecorated iron walls and copper pipes connecting the entire train. However, because it had an extra Narukami cannon, this place also had an additional control console and periscope compared to other iron fortresses, making the space inside the train head even narrower. But for Steward Genro and others, this sense of narrowness brought a sufficient sense of security and satisfaction. This Narukami was actually a heavy howitzer they had spent several years imitating and then installed on Shinano Castle. In fact, the original name of this iron fortress was Shinano Castle, but as the fame of Narukami gradually spread, over time it became known as Narukami Castle. Highness, Superintendent Hulawo specifically requested to be among the first troops to arrive at Hidden Stone's Villagto Station. I feel there is a deeper meaning to this. The adjutant, dressed in a Western-style green military uniform, reminded him. What deeper meaning could there be? He just wants to avoid the initial assault on Konigakaku later and reduce casualties for his own troops. But no matter what, it won't push us to the back, it won't affect our plan. Steward Genro had also changed back into a green military uniform. He sat comfortably in a chair, listening to the noise of the train. In his eyes, no matter how much the Torai army struggled, they were doomed. because according to their plan, they would first fire cannons to blast open the city gate of Kongakaku. Then, when the Torai army from Kai was about to pass through the city gate, they would fire a Narukami cannonball at that spot to send them to meet Amaterasu. As long as the Torai army was finished, it would be enough to intimidate the other chief stewards. After eliminating one or two monkeys, the position of general would naturally be his. As for that so-called world government, since even the Western merchants who had been engaged in sea trade for years hadn't heard of them, it was enough to prove they were just a bunch of unknown henchmen. Most likely, Yatsugawa Ayam had bribed a group of Western pirates and used a coordinated attack to take down Kongakaku, while simultaneously assassinating the unprepared General Amatori. Why is it so quiet? Just then, the adjutant noticed something strange. He walked forward 2 steps to the train crew's side and observed the mountain slope forest on both sides through the train head's glass. However, the faint moonlight under the night sky made it impossible to see anything clearly, but one thing was certain, there was no red light from Kabanrai world. Suddenly, his eyes widened instinctively, and his pupils instantly contracted into pinpricks, as if entering bullet time. He personally witnessed a point on the glass bulge inward, then a strange, slender bullet, like a Narukami cannonball, drilled out. Immediately after, large cracks began to appear all over the surrounding glass. Bang! The next moment, Steward Genro, who was sitting nearby, only heard a muffled sound similar to a watermelon exploding next to his ear, followed by a large amount of liquid splashing onto him. What is this? Still not having reacted, he wiped the liquid from his face and immediately found his palm covered in bright red blood. He quickly looked up at the adjutant in front of him and was horrified to see that the latter's neck was empty. Boom 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 boom. A mournful scream hadn't fully escaped before the entire train car was violently shaken by a massive strength, causing the unprepared Genro army soldiers to stumble and fall. Hiss 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 hiss. Under the train crew's control, this iron-armored train began to brake rapidly, its outer wheels grinding against the railway, producing a large amount of sparks. Enemy attack. Steward Genro covered his arm, which was aching from the impact, and quickly shouted into the nearby copper pipe. Soon, his voice was transmitted to all the train cars behind. To be honest, this was truly the first time they had encountered such a situation. Their years of combat against Kabanrai world had made them almost forget that Kabanrai world wouldn't ambush, but humans would. Da. PFFT, PFFT, PFFT. The moment the Genro army soldiers opened the hatch to come out and engage the enemy, a dense bullet rain from heavy machine guns poured over them, creating one blood hole after another in their bodies, causing a large number of corpses to fall down with a whoosh. This scared the soldiers behind, making them stop in their tracks. Use shields. Bring the shields. Following a loud shout from someone, steel shields specifically used to block Kabanrai world were quickly brought over. They usually used these to block Kabanrai world while the people behind them fired. Indeed. The effect was surprisingly good. Under the protection of these large shields, they only heard the clang of metal hitting metal. More and more Genro army soldiers began to pour out. However, when a rocket launcher, trailing a bright flame tail, flew into the crowd, there was a loud explosion, creating a large ball of flame that devoured all life within its affected range. And that wasn't all. One mortar shell after another crashed down with rapid whistling sounds, blowing the entire Genro army force into chaos, sending people flying and horses overturning. Coupled with more rocket launchers and the bombardment and sweeping firepower of heavy machine guns, basically, anyone who dared to step out of the train car would turn into a corpse within seconds. Return fire. Return fire. But even so, the Genro army had as many as 5,000 troops, and the iron-armored train was long enough that the soldiers in the rear train cars gradually formed small-scale military units. Soon, the characteristic muffled gunshots of steam guns began to increase. Da. However, how could their firepower compare to the Army's uniform heavy machine guns, rocket launchers, and mortars? The latter proved with their advanced equipment that in a war involving weapons, sometimes having more people wasn't very useful. Get down. Lie down quickly. A man in a green military uniform, who seemed to be a middle-ranking military officer of the Genro army, shouted loudly to the soldiers around him from behind a large tree. Bang. Suddenly, his chest and the tree trunk he was hiding behind were pierced together. The man could only look down in disbelief at the blood hole in front of him. How? How is this possible? In the distance, Douglas Barrett touched his bullet after firing a shot, a cruel smile on his face. With his observation hockey and the terrifying power of the latter, as long as the target was within range, even hiding inside an iron-armored train was useless. It was just a pity that this thing couldn't sweep and fire rapid fire like a heavy machine gun. Vice Admiral, we've arrived. Just then, The transponder snail sitting on his shoulder, which was in communication state, shouted. "Remember, leave none alive." "Yes." A moment later, the characteristic sound of heavy machine guns rang out from a greater distance. However, the Drumroll army, having been reminded by the sacrificed military officer, had already lain flat on the forest ground. Most of the firepower net flew continuously over their heads. But what could they do against the mortar shells falling from the sky? In the forest under the night sky, surrounding the iron-armored train that was burning with raging flames, nearly 10,000 soldiers from both sides engaged in a fierce battle. Although the military strength of both sides was similar, the army led by Barrett had surrounded the Drumroll army from all directions. The latter could only lie on the ground, enduring the bombardment of cannon fire and occasionally firing a few shots. And the Narukami, which was extremely famous in Hinamoto, was too close to the enemy. It could only watch helplessly as the surrounding Drumroll army was constantly massacred, unable to fire a single cannonball. Whoosh! 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 Suddenly, rapid whistling sounds also rang out from the direction of the Drumroll army. Immediately after, the forest on the army's side was hit by cannon fire. The former had brought out their mortars and began to return fire. Ha 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 ha. But this only made Douglas Barrett more and more excited. Feeling the blast wave and gunfire flash blowing onto him, he couldn't help but laugh wildly, his black justice coat rustling loudly. That's right, this is how it should be. This is the taste of war. What kind of war is it if you only take hits and don't fight back? To be honest, he really wanted to throw away the bullet in his hand and charge directly into the enemy's military formation to start a massacre. Thanks to Reader 20170701180618431 for the 100 kitty and coin tip. Bo. Thank you for your support and encouragement. Sometimes, I actually wanted to follow the majority of crossover anime novels and quickly transition using the annals writing style after resolving a few main characters and main influences. But then I always feel it would be a pity not to write it well, and I feel that I will definitely regret it in the future. So, I might as well spend a little more time writing out the effect I want, even if sometimes it's not satisfactory due to my writing skills. At least I did my best, right? There are some parts that readers can't understand. I feel I still need to persevere and write a more complete world government and a relatively detailed conquest process. Chapter 227, Cypher Pal New. Boom. 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 Genuine cannon fire filled the sky. Hundreds of cannonballs, with sharp whistling sounds, continuously bombarded the city wall, which was dozens of meters high. Each explosion blasted apart a section of the wall. The splashing gravel flew around like bullets with whooshing sounds. Thick gun smoke turned into black mist, spreading over the city tower, assaulting the hearing, smell, and sight of the city guard soldiers. This situation is truly exaggerated. Mima Amatori wore a black army uniform at this time, with a black mask covering the lower part of his face below the eyes. His expression unchanged, he allowed the war to rage around him. Each time the blast wave blew, his pink long hair fluttered in the air. Following his gaze, one could clearly see the terrifying scene after tens of thousands of the army had arrayed their situation. They were like a Kabanrai world that didn't glow. Looking out, they were densely packed black shadows. However, the advantage in numbers posed little threat to Hiddenstone's village tow station, which had high city walls and a defensive pit. Not just any army could climb a city wall dozens of meters high with just a grappling hook, like the army led by Bullet. The soldiers here probably couldn't even throw one up. But the more than 300 mortars and over 100 cannons in front of their formation were different. The cannonballs, like raindrops, bombarded the defending side zone soldiers, making them suffer immensely. To be honest, even Mima Amatori, who considered himself well informed, had never seen so many cannons arrayed together. He finally had a clear concept of the Alliance Expeditionary Force formed by the chief stewards of the 12 regions. It was truly terrifying. Although their own city wall also had over 100 defensive cannons that could engage in mutual bombardment, the 4-to-1 firepower disparity made things difficult. If not for the sturdy city wall as a reliance, they would have been wiped out long ago. But, unfortunately, no matter how powerful a human army is, how can it contend with God? In his view, the gap between the world government and Hinamoto was the gap between man and God, between heaven and earth. Now, the former was merely playing a game with the latter. This so-called Alliance Expeditionary Force was destined to be mere dry bones in a tomb. However, his current mission, Mima Amatori, was to hold Hiddenstone's village tow station. It seemed the difficulty in achieving this was not small. The biggest threat was the 12 white iron fortresses at the other end of his sight. Because there were only 4 tracks in the direction of this city gate, only 3 iron-armored trains could form a single column. They lay like a pack of fierce beasts outside the range of their own cannons, using the garrison cannons on their roofs to provide the most ferocious firepower for the Alliance army. Their main target was the huge city gate hanging above. The only way for the Alliance expeditionary force to attack inside the city was to blast open the drawbridge-style city gate, or blow it down. Only then could the advantage of tens of thousands of military strength be fully displayed. "We must find a way to take down those iron fortresses," Mima Amatori said in a deep voice with a solemn expression. "Elder brother, why don't you let us go?" At this moment, Hazumi, the girl in red standing beside him, stood on her tiptoes and volunteered. Her cute little face was full of eager excitement. Accustomed to fighting and killing, she was quite adapted to this kind of battlefield environment and atmosphere. It was worth mentioning that the radiance blooming on her chest was no longer a flame-like red light, but a faint blue light like the deep sea. This was Hazumi, who, in order to be with Ikuma for a long time and not easily die in future combat, had voluntarily proposed injecting black blood to evolve into a more powerful Nu. At the same time, meanwhile, on either side of Hazumi, also standing behind Mima Amatori, were Blueheart, Meko, and Steve Gus, all Kabanrai in their new form. These individuals had been separately designated as a squad by Cypher Paul, with the full code name Cypher Paul Nu. Steve Gus served as the captain, with a rank equivalent to Cypher Paul 9 agent. It was worth mentioning that Blueheart, having injected black blood on top of her black smoke core form, was equivalent to a wild Nu that had received another level of enhancement. She was personally named Deep Nu by Dr. Fritz of the Biochemical Research Institute. Judging solely by the activation of the Kabanrai virus within her body, she should be the strongest Kabanrai in the squad. However, when it came to actual combat power, Gus, as the captain, could still suppress her. But there was a prerequisite for this: Blueheart didn't have enough Kabanrai world to control. Her Black Gundam combat mode was still too difficult for the current Steve Gus to deal with. Under the gaze of these individuals, Mima Amatori also felt some hesitation in his heart. Lieutenant General Douglas Barrett had previously strictly ordered him not to deploy combat power above the colonel rank unless the city gate of Hidden Stones Village tow station was breached. Furthermore, he was not allowed to let the defending army soldiers hide below the city to avoid the bombardment. They had to defend on the city wall using cannons or machine guns. He understood in his heart that this was still for the training of the army. At that time, he had specifically asked why the world government's army needed to be trained in this manner. Who would have thought that Vice Admiral Barrett looked down at him and coldly replied, "Your world is only worth this much to us." Instantly, he understood. It turned out they were treating this place as a recruit training ground. To be honest, it sounded harsh, but for Mima Amatori, who believed that the weak had no authority to live, it wasn't really difficult to accept. He was now wholeheartedly thinking about how to integrate into the world government, and then climb step by step towards the higher-ups, making himself a powerhouse who possessed both strength and influence again. However, before coming, Senior Director Addison had called him over and instructed him that the city gate of Hidden Stones Village tow station absolutely could not be breached. The reason was that this was the world government's first war in another world, and what would it mean if the city gate defended by their army was breached? So it was best to achieve a perfect conclusion. For this, Senior Director Addison told him that he was allowed to use special combat power at critical moments, and this special combat power was the CP Nu assigned to him. To be fair, Mima Amatori himself didn't really want the city gate to be breached either, as this was his first military mission since officially joining the world government. The current problem was that the sense of threat Douglas Barrett gave him was too strong. But thinking about it carefully, he only said I wasn't allowed to use the army's officers. He didn't say I wasn't allowed to use Cypher Paul's combat power. However, he also knew that people like Bullet didn't seem like they would listen to reason. It was possible he might be slapped to death for going against the other party's ideas. After all, that person even dared to hit Vice Admiral Crocodile. Boom, another shot from an Iron Fortress's garrison cannon bombarded the city gate. Suddenly, the city gate below began to emit a clanking metal noise. Its sound was loud and piercing, attracting the attention of many people on both sides. What's the situation? Mima Amatori's expression changed, and he quickly ran over. An army soldier ran over from that side and shouted loudly. Sir, one of the steel chains holding up the city gate has been blown off. Clearly, the city gate of Hidden Stones Village tow station could no longer hold on. He had to make a decision immediately. Captain Gus, please. Whoosh, just as Mima Amatori was about to issue an order for the new squad to go and take down the 12 iron fortresses heavily guarded by troops. An extremely sharp whistling sound, suddenly suppressing all the roars on the battlefield, resounded through the sky. Boom, the next moment, under the shocked gaze of all the defenders, a surging fireball engulfed one iron fortress. The violent shockwave lifted the two adjacent iron fortresses off the railway. What was that? Chapter 228, The War Bullet Wants. Damn it, what is that Zhuanlu guy thinking? 10 minutes ago, on the plain below Hidden Stone's village tow station city, Superintendent Huo stood beside his own Kai castle, angrily watching the city wall and city gate being fiercely bombarded by their own cannon fire. When exactly are they going to rush over? Indeed, this is too much. The iron fortress that departed with Narukami Castle has been here for so long, yet they still haven't arrived? I think he's doing it on purpose. The group of chief stewards gathered around Superintendent Huo also started complaining loudly with dissatisfaction. Although their side's cannon fire offensive was particularly fierce, hitting the defending side so hard they could barely lift their heads, even the city gate was on the verge of collapse. But only they knew what was really going on. Over 300 mortars, plus over 100 defensive cannons brought over, and the garrison cannons on the iron fortress. How many cannonballs would all of these consume? It's true that they still have quite a bit now, but the problem is they're not attacking Kongakaku right now, but Hidden Stone's village tow station. If they use up more than half of their cannonballs here, what will they do later? Although they were also very puzzled, they had clearly heard that the city wall of Hidden Stone's village tow station was destroyed by black smoke, so how was it completely intact after they arrived? Logically speaking, this amount of time shouldn't be enough to repair the city wall. But now the facts were laid out before their eyes. Thinking too much about these matters was useless. Besides bracing themselves and forcefully attacking, what other way was there? There was. Have the Genro army's Narukami fire a damn shot. Even if it can't achieve the legendary feat of piercing the city gate with one shot, firing 2 or 3 shots should be enough. But damn it, that son of a bitch Zhuanlu actually chose to hide in the rear and not come over. Isn't his clearly a scheme to deplete their cannonball reserves? This kind of action is too sickening. This directly resulted in the chief stewards, who had previously followed Steward Genro's lead, gathering one after another beside Superintendent Huo and swearing profusely at the former. We can't just let the Genro army off like this. Superintendent Huo took a step forward, scanning the surrounding chief stewards as he shouted loudly. Gentlemen, let's first stop the bombardment. After they arrive later, we will directly seize Narukami Castle. We will operate the Narukami ourselves to take down Hidden Stone's village tow station and then Kongakaku. This. Regarding this proposal of his, some chief stewards present showed a hesitant expression on their faces. They were still wary of the Genro army's strength. Humphrey, they only have 5,000 people. What about our side? Seeing the expressions of these people, Superintendent Huo felt very contemptuous in his heart, muttering inwardly. Are cowardly rats like you even worthy of being Hinamoto's generals? But although he looked like a brute, he could also manage to keep a straight face and not reveal his thoughts. He continued speaking. Furthermore, that bastard Zhuanlu definitely won't expect us to make a direct move. With intention against no intention, we can definitely quickly capture the entire Genro army. Immediately after, Superintendent Huo quite forcefully made another decision. After taking down the Genro army, except for Narukami which will belong to our Torai army, their soldiers, firearms, cannon, and food will all be divided among you. Even that Shinano station will also belong to you. As expected. As soon as these words came out, all 11 chief stewards one after another revealed greedy gazes. Who doesn't know that the Genro army's equipment is the finest, all of it Western goods purchased from overseas? And that Shinano station is said to have a development level comparable to Kongakaku. It's absolutely a big piece of fat meat. Good. Then it's settled. Since Steward Genro was inhumane first, then don't mind us being unjust. Just as all the lords had finished issuing the ceasefire order, they were surprised to find that as the last cannonball hit, the city gate of Hidden Stone's village tow station was about to give out. It seems that one of the iron chains was blown off. Steward Kozo of Wakamatsu Station said with a conflicted expression. If this continues, it won't take long before the other one breaks too. Then by that time. Now a new choice was placed before everyone. Should they continue firing cannon to destroy the city gate and attack, or wait for the Genro army's Narukami castle to come over? This old man thinks we should continue firing cannon. Let's take down Hidden Stone's village tow station first, then talk about it. Not appropriate, not appropriate. What if the Genro army comes over during this process? By the time, someone else might inform them and make them vigilant. What do you mean by this? Are you suspecting that we would break our promise? Hee, you never know what's in someone's heart. Who knows? You. At once, the 12 chief stewards of the Alliance Expeditionary Force, including Superintendent Huo, actually started arguing loudly among themselves, causing the scene to become very chaotic. They were inherently in a competitive relationship. Previously, everyone had the same goal, so naturally everything was easy to talk about and negotiate. But now, almost opposite disagreements had arisen, and they suddenly divided internally into two mutually hostile factions. Although the Torai army's strength was the strongest, in the end, they only had a force of 5,000 troops. Within this alliance army of over 40,000, they could not be considered the main force. Moreover, nominally, he didn't have much authority. Steward Genro was at least the initiator and could be considered everyone's previously tacitly agreed upon alliance leader. Now, even this alliance leader was no longer acknowledged by anyone, and they still wanted to work together to kill the other side. Naturally, they had completely become a group of dragons without a head. Whoosh, fortunately, it seemed someone didn't want them to continue arguing. After all, it hurt feelings and was disharmonious, so they used a sharp whistling sound to attract everyone's attention. When Superintendent Hulwo and the others subconsciously looked towards the direction of the sound source, in less than a second, their eyes were blinded by an intense burst of dazzling white light before them. As a wave of heat wave closely followed and rushed towards their faces, they completely fell into darkness. Boom, such a deafening explosion sound, these chief stewards were unable to hear it. They had originally thought that the place where the 12 iron fortress were located would be very safe as it was beyond the range of the defensive cannons. Coupled with wanting to surround Superintendent Hulwo to discuss matters, they had naturally gathered beside Kai Castle. But who could have thought that a justice cannonball would be fired from behind? And just their luck, it smashed right towards them. Haha. 1 kilometer away on the railway, a white iron armored train, its surface covered in shell craters, bullet holes, bloodstains, and soot, lay stationary in place. Inside its train head, Bullet stayed alone in this narrow space, laughing wildly and heartily. In front of him was exactly the control console for the Narukami overhead. It was just now that he, using his observation hockey, fired a cannon from this captured Narukami castle towards the Iron Fortress position of the Alliance Expeditionary Force. Moreover, the cannon he fired was specifically aimed at Superintendent Hulwo and the others. It was really because the aura in their area was too conspicuous. 12 people were surrounded by over 100 people with the strongest aura, and they were all standing far in the rear. If he didn't hit there, where else would he hit? At the same time. At this moment, the 7,000 army soldiers Bullet had brought out had already established a defensive position centered around this Narukami castle. Rows of heavy machine guns, mortars, and rocket launchers stood ready in formation. Their mission was to stop the Alliance Expeditionary Force's subsequent counterattack, gain more time for the Narukami to fire a few more cannons, and destroy the remaining Iron Fortress one by one. Soon. Although the simultaneous deaths of the 12 chief stewards brought a certain degree of chaos to the Alliance Expeditionary Force, after all, they were on the battlefield and thinking about saving their own lives. The high-rank samurai still quickly established a new command system. They allocated 20,000 military strength to continue the bombardment of Hidden Stone's village tow station city wall, attempting to capture it as quickly as possible. They allocated another 10,000 military strength as reserves. The remaining 20,000 soldiers spread out under the leadership of one samurai after another, advancing mightily towards Bullet's side. But after all, they were separated by a distance of 1 kilometer. Just relying on their feet to walk over would also require a considerable amount of time. Whoosh, as expected. Bullet's side fired the second Narukami cannon, accurately and completely blowing up an iron fortress that was slowly starting up and preparing to relocate. This again brought him a large amount of joy. In the past few days, he had truly fully enjoyed the pleasure of otherworld war. He was seen muttering in his mouth. It's just that the opponents are too weak, and the war scale is too small. If only I could encounter an evenly matched war opponent one day, that would be great. The war scale must be at least in the tens of thousands. Chapter 229, List of Key Personnel to Search For. On the planet C mainland, in Mary Joyce, the room of authority always seemed so clean and luxurious, with even the air emitting a faint fragrance. The fragrance of authority. Addison from the Kabanari world sent back intelligence. Just last night, the army led by Bullet completely annihilated the so-called Alliance Expeditionary Force. During this time, no combat power above colonel rank was used, nor was new deployed. There were some casualties, with over 1,000 army soldier killed in action, but Narukami was captured. St. Topman Warkari, in charge of the political affairs department, said in a deep voice, his fingers interlaced in front of him. Narukami. Oh, that's the heavy howitzer with a caliber of 480 millimeters that was mentioned before, right? St. Jaga Ursha Saturn, in charge of commanding the whole army, only remembered after a few seconds. The truth was, while this thing sounded quite impressive, to the world government, it really was just a thing. As for the loss of over 1,000 army soldier, that was even less worth mentioning. Yes, Bullet is preparing to dismantle it and have the Academy of Science renovation it to serve as a toy for the next period. St. Marcus Mars, in charge of the Proclamation Government Institute, shook his head with a wry smile upon hearing St. Topman Warcurry's words. That kid really knows how to cause trouble for the Academy of Science. The people over there are already swamped. If it doesn't take much effort, just satisfy him. Bullet has earned merit this time, and the troops he trains are indeed excellent. Ryman has praised him to me several times. St. Jaga Ursha Saturn chose to speak up for his subordinate at this moment, mainly because Bullet's own potential was worth his attention. Alright, this old man will mention it to the Academy of Science. Speaking of which, the Academy of Science has successively recruited some researcher from various domain recently, and among them, they found scientist from the list. This is truly a pleasant surprise. St. Marcus Mars chuckled happily as if he had thought of something, which piqued the curiosity of the other 4-5 elders. The list. They knew about this. It was the list of key personnel to search for given to them by Lord Demu, said to be people who would play important roles in the future. And the list given to St. Marcus Mars naturally consisted of scientists from various domain. Dr. Wolf was indeed found in the North Blue, just as the information on the list provided. However, when the search personnel arrived at Flying Swallow Island, he had already gone out to sea with his son, Buck. Gone out to sea? Could it be? Seeing their gaze, St. Marcus Mars knew what they were thinking. He sighed helplessly. That's right, just as you thought, that Buck went out to sea and became a pirate. Dr. Wolf has been following him out of concern for his son. Then how was he found later? St. Topman Warcurry asked curiously. Because they hadn't been out to sea for long, the search personnel we sent contacted the surrounding marine branch, and they found the father and son a week later. That is, the drunkard pirates founded by Buck. He even has a bounty on his head, 23 million Bailey. That high? St. Topman Warcurry frowned. A bounty of over 20 million was already quite high in the North Blue. He asked. Does this Buck have high strength? He's alright in the North Blue. The main thing is that he's a special Paramsha system drunk fruit ability user. Not only can he turn himself into liquid and dissolve, but he can also control alcoholic vapor to make people around him drunk. St. Marcus Mars spread his palm and smiled. You know, in that sea area where basically no one has mastered hockey, even the Marines have no way against his ability. It was our search personnel who took him down. And then? The rest was simple. Dr. Wolf, in order to prevent his son from being sent to Impel Down, agreed to join the Academy of Science and work for us. Speaking of this, he looked towards St. Jaga Ursha Saturn, who was in charge of the judiciary, wearing a black flat hat and a full face. Considering his ability characteristics, he was transferred to the judiciary. Speaking of which, Impel Down is also under their management now. The latter nodded and smiled. This old man has already handed Buck over to Dragon for training. I believe it won't be long before our Ministry of Police Affairs gains another expert. The police force most needed ability user like this who had little lethality but possessed strong capture effect. The drunk fruit was clearly very suitable. Speaking of which, this Dr. Wolf is indeed a genius scientist. He is very skilled in the mechanical research and development field. The key is that the thing he is currently researching is very interesting, even Vegapunk has praised it a few times. St. Marcus Mars stroked his long straight beard and sighed with emotion. Without waiting for others to ask, he immediately revealed what it was. He wants to research a ship that can dive into the deep sea and voyage at high speed without needing a coating bubble, like Sea Kings. He calls it a submarine. Upon hearing the function of this submarine, all the 5 elders' gaze lit up. They could all imagine what a great value such a thing would have if it truly existed. Coating bubble took too long. If this troublesome step could be omitted, the efficiency of entering and exiting the New World would be much higher in the future. They no longer like to call the sea area where the great pirates gathered the New World. After all, compared to the real New World, what the hell was the latter considered a New World? Can this submarine also be used for underwater attacks? St. Jaga Ursha Saturn, as a military enthusiast, immediately thought of its military value. St. Marcus Mars was amused. Hey, you really hit the nail on the head. Dr. Wolf also thought of this point, so in his research plan, he also intends to equip this submarine with special underwater shell, called torpedo. St. Jaga Ursha Saturn was immediately satisfied. He looked at the other person and said heavily. This Dr. Wolf is definitely a talent. You must provide him with good protection and fully assist him in developing the submarine as quickly as possible. St. Marcus Mars nodded with a pleased expression. You don't need to tell us, we will do that. Alright, we've gone off topic too much. The main agenda item for this gathering is the selection of the higher-ups for the Otherworld Strategy Committee. Seeing that the small talk was finished, St. Topman Warcurry immediately steered the conversation back on track. This Otherworld Strategy Committee was a new department they planned to propose establishing at the upcoming government conference, which is the world government's supreme political affairs conference. It would be specifically responsible for the resource integration, resource allocation, and maintenance of stable order for all Stargate world in the future, so its authority scope was quite large. At this, the other four finally brought their minds back and their expression became serious. This old man will speak first. The other World Strategy Committee must have the authority to mobilize the army, Cypher Paul, and police force within the Stargate world. Otherwise, if an unexpected situation arises, it will be difficult for them to handle it immediately. St. Topman Warcurry's gaze swept towards St. Jaga Ursha Saturn, St. Jaga Ursha Saturn, and St. Shepherd Jupiter. Fortunately, these three also understood the importance of this matter. On the army side, they can be allowed to directly mobilize combat power below Commodore, but afterwards, they need to provide a reasonable explanation to the corresponding military department. It's similar for Cypher Paul. Personnel below division chief level can be mobilized by them. Likewise, you need to give us an explanation later. However, upon hearing St. Shepherd Jupiter's words, St. Topman Warcurry frowned and asked, "Only division chief level? Why not bureau chief level? We are the intelligence department. Bureau chief level officials hold too much secret intelligence. Giving the other World Strategy Committee direct authority to mobilize is not appropriate." The former gave a reasonable explanation with a poker face. The latter could only say no more after hearing it. Cypher Paul's bureau chief level was equivalent to the highest officer of each No. CP, such as the highest officer of Cypher Paul 7 agent, the highest officer of Cypher Paul 9 agent, and so on. On the Ministry of Police Affairs side, although it hasn't fully taken shape yet, we can agree for the future as well, allowing them to directly mobilize police force below Senior Police Superintendent. After speaking, St. Jaga Ursha Saturn added self-deprecatingly, "You probably aren't very familiarized with this rank. It's equivalent to the military's officer, field grade." St. Topman Warcurry nodded. He wasn't very concerned about the Ministry of Police Affairs. How it would turn out would depend on its future performance. Chapter 230, Pika's New Identity. This was a stone slab room that looked very simple, without much decoration. If it had any characteristics, it might be its size, covering over 400 square meters, which didn't seem like it was meant for a single person to live in. Moreover, the furniture inside was pitifully sparse, a rectangular stone table with a stone cup and stone plate on its surface, with 4 stone chairs around it, and a large stone bed and stone cabinet in the corner. It must be said, the style of this house was truly hard. Walls are load-bearing and enclosing components of buildings. As load-bearing components, walls bear the loads transmitted from the roof and floor slabs and transfer these loads to the foundation. Sharp, high-pitched reading sounds continuously emanated from the only man in the room. This man, with a head of wavy purple long hair, sat before the stone table, wearing only a set of golden cross-faced armor. Its coverage area was particularly small, giving a sense of near nudity. But his massive body size, nearly 4 meters tall even when sitting, and his muscle mass, slightly more robust than beef tendons, brought a strong sense of intimidation. However, despite such an incredibly burly physique and appearance, his reading voice was much sharper than a woman's, immediately creating a strong sense of incongruity. Looking at the stone table in front of him, there were more than a dozen thick books and various design blueprints and files stacked on it. Building composition, architectural art, building materials, architectural design, and so on. Basically all the book titles were related to architecture. The book he was currently reading had the large characters building structure, intermediate printed on its cover. Thump thump thump. Just as the man was staring intently at the book cover, reading the contents seriously, a knock on the door interrupted his reading. "Mr. Pika, the materials for the first part have arrived." Seeing that the visitor was Director Lucine, Pika had no choice but to pick up a long stone slab strip from beside him to mark the page, then gently close the interesting book. Actually, when he was first sent here by Doflamingo to the world government to cooperate with the construction department on the construction project, he was quite reluctant. Because Pika felt that he should be a fierce combat general, but constrained by the inability to refuse the young master's direct order, he came without saying anything. It sounded like he was being asked to help build houses, which would be so easy with his devil fruit ability. He just needed to finish quickly and go back. But when he actually arrived at the construction site, he found that the matter wasn't that simple. He still understands it very clearly. It was in a winter island area numbered RL0003. The construction department's requirement for him was to use the prepared stone material and try to build a stone building according to the design blueprint they provided. The problem was, how could he understand any design blueprint? He only remembered the basic outline and the rough distribution of the rooms inside. Then, without a word, he merged into the mountain of stone material, using his Parimsha system stone fruit ability to fuse them into an entity. Soon, a stone building with an exterior basically identical to the design blueprint rose from the ground under everyone's surprised gaze. At that time, he felt a bit smug. However, a situation that puzzled him occurred next. As he separated from it, the stone building collapsed behind him with a crash, bringing all the cheers to an abrupt halt. Later, after multiple experiments, the architects of the construction department saw the problem. It turned out that the buildings he created only resembled the exterior, but the internal details and structure were a complete mess. When he was inside the building, because the strength of the devil fruit maintained the overall stability, it looked like there were no issues. But after releasing the ability control, the stone building became an ordinary creation, and everything had to obey basic physical rules. Pika was very shocked. Before, he only used his stone fruit ability for combat, naturally not caring about the matter that would happen afterward. But now it was different. From then on, at the request of the construction department, he began to intensely study architectural knowledge. They didn't require him to be very professional, but at least reach the level of being able to understand design blueprints. At the same time, while learning theory, under the guidance of the architects, he continuously created various small buildings. During this process, they would constantly point out problems, which helped increase Pika's architectural experience. Anyway, with the stone fruit ability, there was no issue of excessive time consumption or wasted stone material. He could completely reconstruct repeatedly. In the beginning, Pika was very reluctant, but a strange matter occurred. As the time spent learning architectural knowledge passed day by day, he actually found that it wasn't difficult to understand. This made him feel the joy of gaining something. After that, the more he read, the happier and more engrossed he became, especially when he combined the theory he learned with practice and personally witnessed the production of sufficiently good effects. He became even more excited. He inexplicably fell in love with architecture, with building all sorts of stone buildings, stone houses, and stone bridges. He just had this feeling that he could build everything. Oh, right. It's worth mentioning that besides his identity as a Don Quixote family high-ranking executive, Pika now had a new identity, senior architect in the construction department under the World Government Administrative Department. Although he could only be considered an apprentice in architecture, the stone fruit's ability in building was something those architects couldn't compare to. Or rather, in terms of knowledge, Pika could catch up to other architects given enough time, but where could the architects find a second stone fruit? Let's go. Pika stand up and followed the construction department division chief out of his stone house. Stepping outside, his vision immediately opened up. Looking out, he could see hundreds of various construction machinery working intensely on the vast construction site. The roar of excavators, bulldozers, and heavy trucks assailed him. Especially the scene of rolling smoke raised by the heavy trucks shuttling back and forth and the activity of over 1,000 workers wearing uniforms perfectly embodied the phrase bustling with activity. This was the Red Line RL001 area. Originally, this place was covered in dense bushes and lush greenery, but now all the vegetation and trees had long been leveled by the mighty project team, revealing the bright red earth. The project they were now building was called the New World Government Headquarters. The mission was to allow the upcoming Supreme Political Conference to be held in this brand new place. Although Pika was present, this didn't mean the entire construction project didn't need others. He was only responsible for the main structure of the overall building. Of course, this alone had saved the construction department an immeasurable amount of time, laborers, materials, and funding. No matter what, once it was built, he would be the primary contributor. Mr. Pika, this is the design blueprint for the New World Government Headquarters. We want to build the first part here first. Please take a look. An architect walked over holding a visual den mushy. Soon, a virtual screen was projected into the air before Pika's eyes. However, the first glance left him a bit confused. Isn't his the world government emblem? His sharp voice rang out with deep confusion, but everyone present was already used to this voice full of sense of incongruity. The key was that no one dared to laugh out loud. A few who had laughed before were beaten severely by Pika and were still lying in the hospital. Looking at the screen feed displayed in the air, wasn't it just 5 white circles connected by a cross? This is an overhead view, please look again. As the architect switched to another design blueprint, Pika was surprised to find that the white circles, when viewed from an upward view, were actually giant round buildings, and the cross was actually a skywalk set up in the middle section of the floors. 5 round buildings, 4 skywalks, surrounded by some forest, flower bed, lake, and 10 tennis courts as accompaniment. That was the New World Government Headquarters. What we need to build now is this first office building. We're counting on you. Understood, let's try it first. Pika nodded, moving his tall and sturdy body size towards the construction site in the distance, where the workers had already laid the foundation and piled up the stone material inside. It must be said, He felt he had found a new direction in life here. He had asked himself many times before which he preferred, this or combat. He actually found it hard to give an answer, because he didn't dislike combat, otherwise he wouldn't have trained this body of steel like muscle. But one thing was clear, building is something he liked. Chapter 231, the first otherworlder to arrive on Planet C. A few days later, morning. The morning sun had only just risen less than 2 hours ago, and the air was still filled with the lingering chill of the night. Stargate Base RL 1556. As the last electric gate of the core facility, biochemical safety station opened to the left and right, a handsome man who had completed all disinfection procedures slowly emerged with elegant steps. Swish, a high, heroic nose, sword-like eyebrows slanted into a few strands of pink hair falling by his temples. The black military uniform on his body, paired with the long saber at his waist, and especially the black justice coat draped over his shoulders, gave off a heroic aura that made it impossible to look away. He took a deep breath of the fresh air of the other world, feeling completely refreshed. Nearby, the army soldiers on guard duty looked at this overly thin and somewhat short army officers with curious gazes. There was nothing for it. Mima Amatori, whose height was only a little over 1.7 meters, was indeed quite noticeable among the crowd averaging 1.8 meters. But he didn't care about these gazes, because his heart wasn't so fragile as to feel inferior due to his height. Instead, his mood at this moment was very stirred. The homeland of the world government, Planet C world, huh? Then let's make a big splash here. Mima Amatori lightly pressed his palm to his chest. This genius, the son of the shogun from Hinamoto in Kabanrai world, who could lead a 400,000-strong army to conquer Kyushu Island at the age of 12, looked ambitiously at the azure sky and the crimson ground beneath his feet. Since the end of the Alliance Expeditionary Force battle, he had officially become a staff officer in the Army Staff Office, part of the first staff department within the Staff Department, under the Supreme Military Command of the World Government Whole Army. His military rank was Army Major, but his main job wasn't to execute combat missions, but rather clerical duty like processing intelligence and participating in operation plans. In other words, he was Tsuru's subordinate. Hey, kid, how long are you planning to space out there? Suddenly, a patch of yellowish sandstorm formed not far away, followed by a voice that felt very familiar to him. Looking over, he indeed saw a tall figure standing there. Vice Admiral Crocodile. Mima Amatori's heart filled with joy. He hadn't expected this big shot to come pick him up. It seemed he had latched onto a powerful backer, which would significantly reduce the difficulty of him adapting to this environment. You're the first otherworlder to come to our world. Let's go. Vice Admiral Crocodile turned around and, with Mima Amatori following, strode towards the gate of the Stargate base under the salutes of the soldiers along the way. His current attire was more formal than when he was in Kabanrai world. A high-class sandy yellow suit paired with brand new black leather boots, plus the black justice coat, truly made him look like a high-ranking commander. Aren't you busy with training? Also, where are we going? As he spoke, Mima Amatori looked around at the environment, especially the steel gate in front, which was comparable to the city gate in his world. He was very confused as to why Planet C needed such a large gate when it didn't face the threat of the Kabanrai world, but he kept this question in his heart. This is just the Stargate base of number 0001 Kabanrai world. I'm taking you to Army Headquarters, a land force. After saying that, Vice Admiral Crocodile got into the back seat of a black military vehicle. Get in the vehicle. Although it's not very far from RL 1555, it's not close either. Mima Amatori had never seen this kind of vehicle, but he had already prepared himself mentally to witness all sorts of novel things. He just glanced at it and calmly got in. As the army soldier acting as the driver started the military vehicle, this oversized military vehicle, specially made for tall individuals like Vice Admiral Crocodile, sped away emitting white smoke, leaving the Stargate base behind it further and further. I heard Addison say that you kid want to try training martial arts? Vice Admiral Crocodile lit a cigar for himself, holding it in his mouth as he looked at Mima Amatori beside him. The latter nodded and replied firmly. I firmly believe in the law of the jungle, and I think that for the weak to survive, the only way is to become strong. Therefore, I want to become a powerhouse. Vice Admiral Crocodile exhaled a puff of green smoke and grinned. So you injected black blood before you came? Yes. Mima Amatori lowered his head and glanced at his left chest. Beneath the military uniform, his heart had changed from red light to blue light. He was already a Kabanrai in new form. So, next you can follow the soldiers of the Army Headquarters for daily training, and you can give up at any time. But once you give up, you won't get another chance. Hearing Vice Admiral Crocodile's words, Mima Amatori's expression showed a hint of joy. However, the former saw his expression and reminded him. Don't get happy too soon, Kid. The current army training is already on par with the Marines. I've seen their training content, it's not that easy. Oh? Mima Amatori became interested and asked curiously. Can you tell me what the content is? Vice Admiral Crocodile looked at him meaningfully. That's confidential for now. You'll know when you see it for yourself. By then, you might even choose to give up. I won't. Mima Amatori said resolutely. To become strong, I can endure any pain. Hope so. The two fell silent for a moment, but the smoke inside the vehicle grew thicker and thicker, making Mima Amatori uncomfortable. He turned his head to look out the window. He noticed a somewhat familiar scene. He saw a group of workers using various mechanical equipment to lay black railway tracks on the crimson ground. Looking at the direction, it was leading towards the Stargate base. Are they connecting Iron Fortress here too? I heard the world government is preparing to connect the entire Red Line continent with railway tracks and mass-produce the kind of trains from your world to quickly transport manpower and resources. Vice Admiral Crocodile exhaled another puff of smoke and remarked. This scale is truly massive. I wonder when it will be completed. When he was a pirate, he didn't really have any thoughts about the world government. But now, with continuous contact and understanding, he gradually felt what the scale of the world government was like. Several hours later, when the warm and comfortable morning sun became scorching hot, this black military vehicle finally arrived in front of the outer gate of the army headquarters. So big. Mima Amatori, who had just gotten out of the vehicle, was immediately stunned by the incredibly magnificent black fortress before him. Even the black steel gate, which was slowly opening with the two words Justice painted in white, was ridiculously large. Just by estimation, it must be hundreds of meters tall, right? In comparison, the gate of the Stargate base from before couldn't even be called big. Let's go. Vice Admiral Crocodile was already familiar with the environment here. He led Mima Amatori towards the training ground with ease, and the scenes along the way made the latter feel as if he were living in a dream. Not to mention the soldiers who were all 1.8 meters tall and could be seen everywhere. There were actually many people who were 2 meters or taller. Yes, many, very many. 1.8 meters was too inconspicuous in this place. What? What is that? Suddenly, Mima Amatori stopped in his tracks, no longer able to suppress the shock in his heart. He looked at a group of figures on an open training ground in the distance and exclaimed. Vice Admiral Crocodile followed his gaze and chuckled, because he could imagine how shocked this kid was. Oh, this is your first time seeing the giant race, right? They are the giant unit. They originally belonged to Marine headquarters, but I heard they've been transferred to our army side. Next, he took Mima Amatori, whose mind was full of those giant race members, to the zone specifically used for training ordinary soldiers. Another 100 laps. Get running. You're tired after only doing 1,200 push-ups. Didn't you eat enough? Hold on to the rope tightly. Not one less than 100 round trips. If anyone dares to fall, I'll kick them straight off the Red Line continent. Go for the kill. If you have the ability to kill him with a wooden sword, I guarantee you won't be held responsible. As soon as they approached this place, they could hear a large amount of heavy panting filled with fatigue and loud, angry shouts of reprimand. Everywhere they looked were army soldiers strapped to the waist, drenched in sweat, undergoing various high-intensity training. The sense of shock this scene brought to Mima Amatori was even stronger than that from the giant unit earlier, because there were simply too many people here. Definitely over 10,000. The daily standard is 2,000 push-ups, 100 round trips climbing a 100-meter high rope, 200 laps on a 500-meter long-distance running track, combat training using wooden swords where you must beat the other party unconscious, and colonel rank instructors supervising and providing guidance on the side. And this is just the daily physical training. Vice Admiral Crocodile turned his head, looked down at the stunned Mima Amatori, and chuckled. Kid, are you sure you want to join them? The latter was silent for a long time, staring at this spectacular scene for an unknown amount of time. The former didn't rush him either, until Mima Amatori gritted his teeth and nodded. Yes. Chapter 232, I am Golden Lion. Mima Amatori has come to our side. Inside the room of authority, the 5 elders, who had just finished discussing important matters, were drinking matcha, black tea, and coffee, enjoying various desserts and pastries. Suddenly, Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn said something inexplicable. Yes, our world has also welcomed its first otherworlder. I believe there will be more and more in the future. Saint Topman Warcurry said with emotion, holding a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. To them, Mima Amatori herself was just an insignificant nobody, but the significance she carried was very precious. Perhaps one day in the future, the Stargate will be open to the citizens, allowing people from both worlds to travel freely. It might get lively then. Saint Marcus Mars, who was in charge of the Academy of Science and full of imagination, looked at them meaningfully and said, "Opening the Stargate." The others were stunned for a moment. They hadn't thought about this matter before. After all, the current world government shouldn't have anything more important than the Stargate.